I would advise you, in fact, to spend tomorrow at home. We will now set out by twos on different routes. You, Tolkachenko, I ask to occupy yourself with Lyamshin and take him home. You may influence him and, above all, impress upon him the extent to which he will be harming himself first of all by his faint-heartedness. Your relative Shigaliov, Mr. Virginsky, I do not wish to doubt, any more than I do you yourself, he will not denounce us. His action remains regrettable, but, all the same, he has not yet announced that he is leaving the society, so it is too early to bury him. Well, quick now, gentlemen, they may be munheads, but there's no harm in being prudent. Virginsky went with Urkel. In handing Lyamshin over to Tolkachenko, Urkel had managed to bring him to Fyodor Stepanovich and announced that he had come to his senses, repented, and begged forgiveness, and did not even remember what had happened to him. Fyodor Stepanovich went off alone, choosing a way around the other side of the ponds, skirting the park. This was the longest route. To his surprise, Liputin overtook him almost midway. Fyodor Stepanovich, you know, Lyamshin's sure to denounce us. No, he'll come to his senses and realize that if he denounces us, he'll be the first to go to Siberia. Nobody will denounce us now. You won't either. And you? No question, I'll have you all tucked away the minute you make a move to betray, and you know it. But you won't betray anything. Is that why you ran more than a mile after me? Fyodor Stepanovich, you know, we may never see each other again. What gives you that idea? Tell me just one thing. Well, what? I wish you'd clear off, though. One answer, but the right one. Are we the only fivesome in the world, or is it true that there are several hundred fivesomes? I'm asking in a lofty sense, Fyodor Stepanovich. I can see that by your frenzy. And do you know that you are more dangerous than Lyamshin, Liputin? I know, but the answer, your answer. What a foolish man you are. One would think it should make no difference now, one fivesome or 1,000. So it's one. I just knew it. Liputin cried out. I knew all along it was one, right up to this very moment. And without waiting for any other reply, he turned and quickly vanished into the darkness. Fyodor Stepanovich pondered a little. No one will denounce us, he said resolutely, but the crew must remain a crew and obey, otherwise I'll. What trash these people are, though. 2. He first stopped at his place and neatly, unhurriedly, packed his suitcase. The express train was leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning. This early express train came only once a week and had been scheduled very recently, just as a trial for the time being. Though Fyodor Stepanovich had warned our people that he was supposedly going to the district capital, his intentions, as it turned out later, were quite different. After finishing with the suitcase, he settled accounts with the landlady, whom he had notified ahead of time, and moved in a hired carriage to Urkel's place, which was near the station. And only after that, at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, did he go to Kirilov's, where he again penetrated through Fedka's secret passage. The state of Fyodor Stepanovich's mind was terrible. Apart from other discontents quite important for him, he was still unable to find out anything about Stavrogin. He had, it seems, for I cannot confirm it with certainty, received during the course of the day, from somewhere, most likely Petersburg, secret notification of a certain danger awaiting him in the near future. Of course, there are now a great many legends going around town about that time, but even if something is known with certainty, it is known only to those who ought to know of it. And I simply suppose, in my own opinion, that Fyodor Stepanovich might have had doings elsewhere than in our town, so that he might indeed have received notifications. I am even convinced, contrary to Liputin's cynical and desperate doubt, that he could indeed have had 2 or 3 fiefdoms besides ours, in the capitals, for instance, or, if not fiefdoms, then connections and relations, perhaps even very curious ones. No more than 3 days after his departure, an order from the capital was received in our town for his immediate arrest. For what actual doings, ours or some others, I do not know. The order arrived just in time to increase the staggering, almost mystical sense of fear that took possession of our authorities and our hitherto stubbornly frivolous society on the discovery of the mysterious and highly portentous murder of the student Shatov, a murder that filled the measure of our absurdities, and of the extremely enigmatic circumstances that accompanied this event. But the order came too late. Fyodor Stepanovich was already in Petersburg by then, under an assumed name, and from there, having sniffed out what was going on, he instantly slipped abroad. But I am getting terribly far ahead of myself. He entered Kirillov's room with a spiteful and provocative look, as if he wished, along with the main business, also to work off something personal on Kirillov, to vent something on him. Kirillov seemed glad he had come. It was obvious that he had been waiting for him terribly long, and with morbid impatience. His face was paler than usual, the expression of his black eyes heavy and fixed. "I thought you wouldn't come," he said heavily from the corner of the sofa, though not stirring to greet him. Fyodor Stepanovich stood in front of him and, before saying a word, peered closely into his face. "So everything's in order, and we're not going back on our intention." "Good boy," he smiled an offensively patronizing smile. "Well, so what?" he added with vile jocularity. "If I'm late, it's not for you to complain. You got a gift of 3 hours. I don't want any extra hours from you, and you can't give me gifts, fool." "What?" Fyodor Stepanovich jumped, but instantly controlled himself. "How touchy! We're in a rage, eh?" he rapped out with the same air of offensive superciliousness. "At such a moment one rather needs to be calm. Best of all is to regard yourself as Columbus and look at me as a mouse and not be offended at me. I recommended that yesterday. I don't want to look at you as a mouse." "What's that, a compliment?" "Anyhow, the tea is cold, too, so everything's upside down. No, something untrustworthy is going on here." "Ha! What's this I see on the windowsill, on a plate?" He went over to the window. "Oh ho, a boiled chicken with rice. But why hasn't it been touched yet?" So we were in such a state of mind that even a chicken. I ate, and it's none of your business. Keep still. "Oh, certainly, and besides it makes no difference." "But it does make a difference to me. Imagine, I had hardly any dinner at all, so if this chicken is now, as I suppose, no longer needed, eat, if you can." "Much obliged, and tea to follow." He instantly settled down to the table at the other end of the sofa and with extraordinary greediness fell upon the food, but at the same time he observed his victim every moment. Kirillov, with spiteful loathing, looked fixedly at him, as if unable to tear himself away. However, Fyodor Stepanovich suddenly heaved himself up, continuing to eat. "However, about this business? We're not going to back out, eh? And the little note? I determined tonight that it makes no difference to me. I'll write it." "About the tracks?" "Yes, also about the tracks. Anyhow, I'll dictate it. It really makes no difference to you. Can you possibly worry about the contents at such a moment? None of your business. Of course not. Anyhow, just a few lines, that you and Shadev distributed the tracks, with the help of Fedka, incidentally, who was hiding out in your apartment. This last point about Fedka and the apartment is quite important, even the most important. You see, I'm being completely frank with you. And Shadev? Why Shadev? Not Shadev, not for anything. Come on, what is it to you? You can't harm him now. His wife came to him. She woke up and sent to ask me where he is. She sent to find out where he is from you? Hm, that's not good. She might send again, no one must know I'm here. Fyodor Stepanovich became worried. She won't find out, she's asleep again, the midwife is with her, Arena Virgin Sky. That's just, and she won't hear, I suppose? You know, why don't we lock the front door? She won't hear anything. And if Shadev comes, I'll hide you in that room. Shadev won't come, and you are going to write that you quarreled over his betrayal and denunciation, this night, and the cause of his death. He died. Kirillov cried out, jumping up from the sofa. Today, between 7 and 8 in the evening, or, rather, yesterday between 7 and 8 in the evening, since it's now past midnight. You killed him. And I foresaw it yesterday. How could you not foresee it? With this revolver, he pulled out the revolver, ostensibly to show it, after which he did not put it away again, but went on holding it in his right hand, as if in readiness. You, however, are a strange man, Kirillov. You yourself knew it would have to end this way with that foolish man. What else was there to foresee? I chewed it all over for you several times. Shadev was preparing a denunciation, I was watching him, there was no way to let it go at that. And you, too, had instructions to watch him, you told me so yourself 3 weeks ago. Keep still. You did it because he spat in your face in Geneva. For that, and for other things. For many other things, though without any malice. Why jump up like that? What's this posturing?
Oho.
So that's how we are. He jumped up and raised the revolver in front of him. The thing was that Kirillov had suddenly snatched his revolver from the windowsill, loaded and ready since morning. Fyodor Stepanovich positioned himself and aimed his weapon at Kirillov. The latter laughed spitefully. Confess, scoundrel, that you took out the revolver because I'm going to shoot you. But I'm not going to shoot you, although. And again he aimed his revolver at Fyodor Stepanovich as if trying it out, as if unable to deny himself the pleasure of imagining how it would be to shoot him. Fyodor Stepanovich, still positioned, was biding his time until the last moment without pulling the trigger, running the risk of getting a bullet in his own head first. One might well expect it from a maniac. But the maniac finally lowered his arm, gasping and trembling, unable to speak. We've had our play and that's enough. Fyodor Stepanovich also lowered his weapon. I just knew you were playing, only, you were taking a risk, I might have pulled the trigger. And he sat down rather calmly on the sofa and poured himself some tea, though with a slightly trembling hand. Kirillov put his revolver on the table and started pacing back and forth. I won't write that I killed Shadev. I won't write anything now. There won't be any document. There won't? There won't. What meanness and what foolishness! Fyodor Stepanovich turned green with anger. I anticipated it, though. Let me tell you that you haven't caught me unawares. However, as you wish. If I could force you, I would. You are a scoundrel, though. Fyodor Stepanovich became more and more unable to stand it. You asked us for money that time and made a whole cartload of promises. Only I still won't leave without the result. I'll still see at least how you blow your head off. I want you to leave here now. Kirillov stopped firmly in front of him. No, sir, that I won't. Fyodor Stepanovich grabbed his revolver again. You might decide now, from spite and cowardice, to put it all off and go and denounce us tomorrow, to procure a bit of cash again. They do pay for such things. Devil take you, paltry people like you are ripe for anything. Only don't worry, I foresaw it all. I won't leave before I've blown your brains out with this revolver, like that scoundrel Shadov's. If you turn coward and put off your intention, devil take you. You absolutely want to see my blood, too? It's not out of malice, you understand, it makes no difference to me. It's so as not to worry about our cause. One can't rely on people, you see that yourself. I don't understand a thing about your fantasy of killing yourself. I didn't think it up for you, you did yourself even before me, and you originally announced it not to me but to the members abroad. And, notice, none of them tried to elicit anything, none of them even knew you at all. But you yourself came with your confidences, out of sentimentality. So what's to be done if, right then, on that basis, with your own consent and offer, make note of that, your offer, a certain plan for local actions was made, which it is now quite impossible to change. You put yourself in such a position that you now know too much. If you turn tail and go tomorrow with a denunciation, that might prove rather unprofitable for us, don't you think? No, sir, you committed yourself, you gave your word, you took the money. There's no way you can deny that. Fyodor Stepanovich was greatly excited, but Kirillov had long since stopped listening. He was again thoughtfully pacing the room. I'm sorry for Shadov, he said, stopping in front of Fyodor Stepanovich again. Yes, well, maybe I'm sorry, too, but can it be? Quiet, scoundrel! Kirillov bellowed, making a terrible and unambiguous movement, I'll kill you. Well, so I lied, I agree, I'm not sorry at all. Well, enough now. Fyodor Stepanovich jumped up apprehensively, holding out his hand. Kirillov suddenly subsided and began pacing again. I won't put it off, I want to kill myself precisely now, men are all scoundrels. Well, that's the idea, of course, men are all scoundrels, and since it's loathsome for a decent man to be in the world. Fool, I am a scoundrel the same as you, as all of them, not a decent man. There has not been a decent man anywhere. He's finally figured it out. Can it be, Kirillov, that you, with your intelligence, have only now understood that everyone's the same, that no one's better or worse, but just smarter or stupider, and that if men are all scoundrels, which is nonsense, however, then it follows that there even oughtn't to be any non-scoundrels? Ah! So you're really not laughing? Kirillov looked at him with some surprise. You're excited and simply. Can it be that your kind have convictions? Kirillov, I never could understand why you want to kill yourself. I know only that it's from conviction, firm conviction. But if you feel a need, so to speak, to pour yourself out, I'm at your service. Only we must consider the time. What time is it? Oh, the stroke of 2. Fyodor Stepanovich looked at his watch and lit a cigarette. It seems we can still come to terms, he thought to himself. I have nothing to tell you, Kirillov muttered. I remember there was something about God, you did explain it to me once, twice, even. If you shoot yourself, you'll become God, is that right? Yes, I will become God. Fyodor Stepanovich did not even smile, he was waiting. Kirillov gave him a subtle look. You are a political crook and intriguer, you want to bring me down to philosophy and ecstasy and produce a reconciliation, to disperse wrath, and, once I'm reconciled, to extort a note that I killed Shatov. Fyodor Stepanovich answered with an almost natural simple-heartedness. Well, suppose I am such a scoundrel, only in these last minutes what difference does it make, Kirillov? Why are we quarreling? Tell me, please, you're this sort of man, I'm that sort of man, what of it? And besides, we're both scoundrels. Yes, scoundrels, maybe. You know these are only words. All my life I did not want it to be only words. This is why I lived, because I kept not wanting it. And now, too, every day I want it not to be words. Well, each of us seeks a better place. A bug in a rug. I mean, each of us seeks comfort of some sort, that's all. It's been known for an extremely long time. Comfort, you say? Well, we're not going to quarrel over words. No, you said it well, let it be comfort. God is necessary, and therefore must exist. Well, that's wonderful. But I know that he does not and cannot exist. That's more like it. Don't you understand that a man with these two thoughts cannot go on living? Must shoot himself, you mean? Don't you understand that a man can shoot himself for that alone? You don't understand that there may be such a man, one man out of the thousands of your millions, one, who will not want it and will not endure it. I understand only that you seem to be hesitating. That's very bad. Stavrogin was also eaten by an idea. Kirillov, sullenly pacing the room, did not mark his remark. What? Fyodor Stepanovich pricked up his ears. What idea? Did he tell you something himself? No, I myself guessed it. If Stavrogin believes, he does not believe that he believes. And if he does not believe, he does not believe that he does not believe. Well, Stavrogin also has other things more intelligent than that, Fyodor Stepanovich muttered peevishly, watching with alarm the turn of the conversation and the pale Kirillov. Devil take it, he won't shoot himself, he thought. I always suspected it, it's a kink in his brain and nothing more. What trash! You're the last to be with me, I wouldn't like to part badly with you, Kirillov suddenly bestowed. Fyodor Stepanovich did not answer at once. Devil take it, what's this now, he thought again. Believe me, Kirillov, I have nothing against you personally as a man, and I've always. You are a scoundrel and a false mind. But I am the same as you are, and I will shoot myself, while you remain alive. That is, you mean to say I'm so base as to want to remain alive. He still could not tell whether it was profitable or unprofitable for him to continue such a conversation at such a moment, and decided to give himself up to circumstances. But Kirillov's tone of superiority and ever undisguised contempt for him had always annoyed him before, and now for some reason even more than before. Perhaps because Kirillov, who was going to die in an hour or so, Fyodor Stepanovich still kept that in mind, appeared to him as something like a half-man, something of such kind as could no longer be allowed any haughtiness. "You seem to be boasting to me about shooting yourself? I've always been surprised that everyone remains alive." Kirillov did not hear his remark. That's an idea, I suppose, but…" "Ape. You yes me to win me over. Keep still, you won't understand anything. If there is no God, then I am God. Now, there's the one point of yours that I could never understand. Why are you God then? If there is God, then the will is all His, and I cannot get out of His will. If not, the will is all mine, and it is my duty to proclaim self-will." Self-will? And why is it your duty? Because the will has all become mine. Can it be that no one on the whole planet, having ended God and believed in self-will, dares to proclaim self-will to the fullest point? It's as if a poor man received an inheritance, got scared, and doesn't dare go near the bag, thinking he's too weak to own it. I want to proclaim self-will. I may be the only one, but I'll do it. Do it, then. It is my duty to shoot myself because the fullest point of my self-will is for me to kill myself. But you're not the only one to kill yourself, there are lots of suicides. For reasons. But without any reason, simply for self-will only I. He won't shoot himself, flashed again in Fyodor Stepanovich. You know what, he observed irritably, in your place, if I wanted to show self-will, I'd kill somebody else and not myself. You could become useful. I'll point out whom, if you're not afraid. Then maybe there's no need to shoot yourself today. We could come to terms. To kill someone else would be the lowest point of my self-will, and there's the whole of you in that. I am not you, I want the highest point, and will kill myself. Reasoned it all out for himself, Fyodor Stepanovich growled spitefully. It is my duty to proclaim unbelief. Kirillov was pacing the room. For me no idea is higher than that there is no God. The history of mankind is on my side. Man has done nothing but invent God, so as to live without killing himself, in that lies the whole of world history up to now. I alone for the first time in world history did not want to invent God. Let them know once and for all. He won't shoot himself, Fyodor Stepanovich worried. Who is there to know, he kept prodding. There is you and me, and who Liputin? Everyone is to know, everyone will know. There is nothing hid that shall not be revealed. Point 1 He said that. And he pointed with feverish rapture to the icon of the Savior, before which an icon lamp was burning. Fyodor Stepanovich got thoroughly angry. So you still believe in him, and keep the little lamp lit, what is it, just in case or something? The other was silent. You know what, I think you believe maybe even more than any priest. In whom? In him? Listen, Kirillov stopped, gazing before him with fixed, ecstatic eyes. Listen to a big idea. There was one day on earth, and in the middle of the earth stood 3 crosses. One on a cross believed so much that he said to another, "This day you will be with me in paradise." 2 The day ended, they both died, went, and did not find either paradise or resurrection. What had been said would not prove true. Listen, this man was the highest on all the earth, he constituted what it was to live for. Without this man the whole planet with everything on it is madness only. There has not been one like him before or since, not ever, even to the point of miracle. This is the miracle, that there has not been and never will be such a one. And if so, if the laws of nature did not pity even this one, did not pity even their own miracle, but made him, too, live amidst a lie and die for a lie, then the whole planet is a lie, and stands upon a lie in a stupid mockery. Then the very laws of the planet are a lie and a devil's vaudeville. Why live then, answer me, if you're a man? That's another turn of affairs. It seems to me you have two different causes mixed up here, and that is highly untrustworthy. But, excuse me, what if you are God? If the lie ended and you realized that the whole lie was because there had been this former God? You finally understood. Kirillov cried out rapturously. So it can be understood, if even someone like you understands. You understand now that the whole salvation for everyone is to prove this thought to them all. Who will prove it? I don't understand how, up to now, an atheist could know there is no God and not kill himself at once. To recognize that there is no God, and not to recognize at the same time that you have become God, is an absurdity, otherwise you must necessarily kill yourself. Once you recognize it, you are king, and you will not kill yourself but will live in the chiefest glory. But the one who is first, must necessarily kill himself, otherwise who will begin and prove it? It is I who will necessarily kill myself in order to begin and prove it. I am still God against my will, and I am unhappy, because it is my duty to proclaim self-will. Everyone is unhappy, because everyone is afraid to proclaim self-will. That is why man has been so unhappy and poor up to now, because he was afraid to proclaim the chief point of self-will and was self-willed only on the margins, like a schoolboy. I am terribly unhappy, because I am terribly afraid. Fear is man's curse. But I will proclaim self-will. It is my duty to believe that I do not believe. I will begin, and end, and open the door. And save. Only this one thing will save all men and in the next generation transform them physically, for in the present physical aspect, so far as I have thought, it is in no way possible for man to be without the former God. For 3 years I have been searching for the attribute of my divinity, and I have found it. The attribute of my divinity is self-will. That is all, by which I can show in the main point my insubordination and my new fearsome freedom. For it is very fearsome. I kill myself to show my insubordination and my new fearsome freedom. His face was unnaturally pale, his look unbearably heavy. He was as if delirious. Fyodor Stepanovich thought he was going to collapse right there. Give me the pen. Kirillov suddenly cried quite unexpectedly, in decided inspiration. Dictate, I'll sign everything. I'll sign that I killed Shatov, too. Dictate while I'm laughing. I'm not afraid of the thoughts of arrogant slaves. You'll see yourself that all that is hid shall be revealed. And you will be crushed. I believe. I believe. Fyodor Stepanovich snatched himself from his place and instantly gave him an inkstand, paper, and began to dictate, seizing the moment and trembling for his success. I, Alexei Kirillov, declare. Wait. I don't want to. Declare to whom? Kirillov was shaking as if in a fever. This declaration and some sudden, special thought about it seemed to have absorbed him entirely all at once, as if it were some outlet where, if only for a moment, his tormented spirit rushed precipitously. Declare to whom? I want to know whom. To nobody, to everybody, to the first one who reads it. Why specify? To the whole world. To the whole world? Bravo! And so there's no need for repentance. I don't want repentance, and not to any authorities. No, no need, devil take the authorities. But right, if you're serious, Fyodor Stepanovich yelled hysterically. Wait! I want a face at the top with its tongue sticking out. Nonsense! Fyodor Stepanovich got furious. All that can be expressed without any drawing, just by the tone. The tone? That's good. Yes, by the tone, the tone. Dictate with the tone. I, Alexei Kirillov, Fyodor Stepanovich dictated firmly and imperiously, leaning over Kirillov's shoulder and following every letter as he traced it with a hand trembling from excitement. I, Kirillov, declare that today, this th of October, in the evening, between 7 and 8, I killed the student Shatov, for betrayal, in the park, and for his denunciation about the tracks and about Fedka, who secretly lodged with the two of us in Filipov's house, and spent 10 days nights there. And I kill myself today with my revolver not because I repent and am afraid of you, but because abroad I had the intention of ending my life. Only that? Kirillov exclaimed with astonishment and indignation. Not a word more. Fyodor Stepanovich waved his hand, trying to snatch the document from him. Wait! Kirillov placed his hand firmly on the paper. Wait, that's nonsense. I want who I killed him with. Why Fedka? And the fire? I want everything, and also more abuse, in the tone. Enough, Kirillov, I assure you it's enough. Fyodor Stepanovich almost implored, trembling lest he tear the paper up. So that they'll believe you, you must be as obscure as possible, precisely like that, with just hints. You must show only a little corner of the truth, exactly enough to get them excited. They'll always heap up more lies for themselves, and will certainly believe themselves better than us, and that's the best thing, the best of all. Give it to me, it's splendid as it is, give it to me, give it to me. And he kept trying to snatch the paper away. Kirillov, his eyes popping out, listened as if trying to make sense of it, but it seemed he was ceasing to understand. The devil! Fyodor Stepanovich suddenly got furious, but he hasn't even signed it yet. Why are you popping your eyes out? Sign it. I want more abuse, Kirillov muttered, though he did take the pen and sign. I want more abuse. Sign, Vive la Republique, and enough. Bravo! Kirillov almost bellowed with rapture.
Vive la République démocratique, sociale et universelle ou la mort.
No, not that.
Liberté, égalité, fraternité ou la mort.
Asterisk there, that's better, he wrote it delightedly under his signature. Enough, Fyodor Stepanovich kept repeating. Wait, a little bit more. You know, I'll sign it again in French, de Kirillos, gentilhomme russid citoyen du monde. 3. He dissolved in laughter. No, wait, I've got the best one, Eureka, gentilhomme séminariste russid citoyen du monde civilise. That's better than any. He jumped up from the sofa and suddenly, with a quick gesture, snatched the revolver from the windowsill, ran into the other room with it, and closed the door tightly behind him. Fyodor Stepanovich stood for a moment pondering, looking at the door. If it's right now, maybe he'll really shoot, but if he starts thinking, nothing will happen. Meanwhile, he took the paper, sat down, and looked it over once more. He was pleased, again, with the wording of the declaration. What's needed meanwhile? What's needed is to throw them off completely for a time, and so distract them. The park? There's no park in town, so they'll figure out for themselves that it's Skworoshniki. While they're figuring it out, time will pass, while they search, more time, and once they find the corpse, it means what's written here is true, and so it's also true about Fedka. And what is Fedka? Fedka is the fire, he's the Lebyatkins, so everything was coming from here, from Filipov's house, and they didn't see a thing, they overlooked it all now, that will put them into a real whirl. It won't even enter their minds about our people. It's Shatov, and Kirilov, and Fedka, and Lebyatkin. As for why they killed each other, there's another little question for them. The devil, no sound of a shot yet. Though he was reading and admiring the wording, he still kept listening every moment with tormenting alarm and suddenly got furious. He glanced worriedly at his watch. It was a bit late, and it was a good 10 minutes since the man had gone out. Grabbing the candle, he made for the door of the room where Kirilov had shut himself up. Just at the door it occurred to him that the candle was also burning down and in another 20 minutes would go out entirely, and there was no other. He put his hand on the latch and listened cautiously. Not the slightest sound could be heard. He suddenly opened the door and raised the candle. Something bellowed and rushed at him. He slammed the door with all his might and leaned on it again, but everything was already quiet, again dead silence. For a long time he stood indecisively, candle in hand. In that second as he had opened the door, he had been able to make out very little, and yet there had been a flash of the face of Kirilov standing at the back of the room by the window, and of the beastly rage with which the man had suddenly flown at him. Fyodor Stepanovich gave a start, quickly placed the candle on the table, readied his revolver, and sprang on tiptoe to the opposite corner, so that if Kirilov were to open the door and rush at the table with his revolver, he would still have time to aim and pull the trigger ahead of him. Fyodor Stepanovich had now lost all belief in the suicide. He was standing in the middle of the room and thinking, went like a whirlwind through Fyodor Stepanovich's mind. A dark, horrible room, besides. He bellowed and rushed. Two possibilities here: either I hindered him the very second he was pulling the trigger, or he was standing and thinking about how to kill me. Yes, right, he was thinking about it. He knows I won't leave without killing him, if he turns coward himself, so he must kill me first, to keep me from killing him. And again the silence in there. It's even frightening. He may suddenly open the door. The swinishness is that he believes in God worse than any priest. He won't shoot himself for anything. These ones that reason it out for themselves have been multiplying lately. Scum! Devil take it, the candle. It'll certainly burn out in a quarter of an hour. This has got to be finished at all costs. Well, so I could kill him now. With this paper, they'll never think I killed him. I could arrange him and adjust him on the floor with the discharged revolver in his hand so they'd certainly think he himself. The devil, how am I going to kill him? I'll open the door, and he'll rush again and shoot first. The devil, he's bound to miss. So he agonized, trembling at the necessity of the plan and at his own indecision. Finally, he took the candle and again went up to the door, his revolver raised and ready. With his left hand, in which he was holding the candle, he pressed down on the handle of the latch. But the result was clumsy. the handle clicked, there was a noise and a creak. "He'll just go ahead and shoot," flashed in Fyodor Stepanovich. He shoved the door as hard as he could with his foot, raised the candle, and thrust out the revolver, but there was no shot, no cry. No one was in the room. He gave a start. It was an end room, there was no other door, no way of escape. He raised the candle higher and peered more attentively, exactly no one. He called Kirillov in a low voice, then once more, louder, no one answered. Can he have escaped through the window? Indeed, the vent pane was open in one window. Absurd, he couldn't have escaped through the vent. Fyodor Stepanovich walked all the way across the room right to the window, he simply couldn't have. All at once he turned quickly, and something extraordinary jolted him. Against the wall opposite the windows, to the right of the door, stood a wardrobe. To the right of this wardrobe, in the corner formed by the wardrobe and the wall, Kirillov was standing, and standing very strangely motionless, drawn up, his arms flat at his sides, his head raised, the back of his head pressed hard to the wall, in the very corner, as if he wished to conceal and efface all of himself. By all tokens, he was hiding, yet it was somehow not possible to believe it. Fyodor Stepanovich was standing slightly at an angle to the corner and could observe only the protruding parts of the figure. He did not yet dare move to the left so as to make out the whole of Kirillov and understand the riddle. His heart began to pound. And suddenly he was possessed by utter fury. He tore from his place, shouted, and, stamping his feet, rushed fiercely at the dreadful place. But, coming close, he stopped again as if rooted, still more struck with horror. What struck him, above all, was that the figure, despite his shout and furious lunge, did not even move, did not even stir one of its members, as if it were made of stone or wax. The pallor of its face was unnatural, the black eyes were completely immobile, staring at some point in space. Fyodor Stepanovich moved the candle from up to down and up again, lighting it from all points and studying this face. He suddenly noticed that, although Kirillov was staring somewhere ahead, he could see him out of the corner of his eye, and was perhaps even watching him. Then it occurred to him to bring the flame right up to the face of this blackguard, to burn it, and see what he would do. Suddenly he fancied that Kirillov's chin moved and a mocking smile seemed to flit over his lips, as though he had guessed his thought. He trembled and, beside himself, seized Kirillov hard by the shoulder. Then there occurred something so hideous and quick that afterwards Fyodor Stepanovich could never bring his recollections into any kind of order. The moment he touched Kirillov, the man quickly bent his head down, and with his head knocked the candle from his hands. The candlestick fell to the floor with a clang, and the candle went out. At the same instant, he felt a terrible pain in the little finger of his left hand. He cried out, and all he could remember was that, beside himself, he had struck as hard as he could 3 times with the revolver on the head of Kirillov, who had leaned to him and bitten his finger. He finally tore the finger free and rushed headlong to get out of the house, feeling his way in the darkness. Terrible shouts came flying after him from the room. Now, 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 now. 10 times or so. But he kept running and had already reached the front hall when there suddenly came a loud shot. At that he stopped, in the front hall, in the dark, and for about 5 minutes stood reflecting. Finally, he went back to the rooms again. But he had to get himself a candle. It would be no trouble finding the candlestick that had been knocked out of his hands on the floor to the right of the wardrobe, but what would he light the candle end with? Suddenly a dim recollection flashed through his mind. He recalled that the day before, when he ran down to the kitchen to fall upon Fedka, he seemed to have glimpsed in passing, in the corner, on a shelf, a big red box of matches. He groped his way left towards the kitchen door, found it, crossed the landing, and went down the stairs. On the shelf, right in the very spot he had just recalled, his hand came in the darkness upon a full, as yet unopened box of matches. Without striking a light, he hastily went back upstairs, and only near the wardrobe, on the very spot where he had hit Kirillov with the revolver as he was biting him, did he suddenly remember his bitten finger, and in that same instant felt an almost unbearable pain in it. Clenching his teeth, he managed somehow to light the candle end, put it back in the candlestick, and looked around. Near the window with the open vent, feet towards the right-hand corner of the room, lay the corpse of Kirillov. The shot had gone into the right temple, and the bullet had come out higher up on the left side, piercing the skull. Spatters of blood and brains could be seen. The revolver had remained in the suicide's hand, which lay on the floor. Death must have occurred instantly. After examining everything carefully, Fyodor Stepanovich stood up and tiptoed out, closed the door, set the candle on the table in the front room, thought a minute, and decided not to put it out, judging that it would not cause a fire. Glancing once more at the document lying on the table, he grinned mechanically, and only then, still tiptoeing for some reason, left the house. He again got through Fedka's passage, and again carefully closed it up behind him. 3. Exactly at 10 minutes to 6, at the railway station, along the rather long, strung-out line of cars, Fyodor Stepanovich and Urkel were strolling. Fyodor Stepanovich was leaving, and Urkel was saying goodbye to him. His luggage had been checked, his bag taken to a second-class car, to the seat he had chosen. The first bell had already rung, they were waiting for the second. Fyodor Stepanovich looked openly all around him, observing the passengers entering the cars. But he did not meet any close acquaintances, only twice did he have to nod his head to a merchant he knew distantly, and then to a young village priest, who was leaving for his parish 2 stations away. Urkel evidently would have liked to talk about something more serious during these last moments, though perhaps he himself did not know precisely what, but he did not dare begin. He kept fancying that Fyodor Stepanovich was as if burdened by him and was waiting impatiently for the remaining bells. "You look so openly at everybody," he commented with a certain timidity, as though wishing to warn him. "And why not? I shouldn't be hiding yet. It's too soon. Don't worry. I'm only afraid the devil may send Lipyudin, he'll get wind of things and come running." Fyodor Stepanovich, they're unreliable, Urkel spoke out resolutely.
Liputin.
All of them, Fyodor Stepanovich. Nonsense, they're all bound by yesterday now. None of them will betray us. Who would face obvious ruin, unless he's lost his mind? But, Fyodor Stepanovich, they will lose their minds. This thought apparently had already entered Fyodor Stepanovich's head, and therefore Urkel's comment made him still more angry. "You haven't turned coward, too, Urkel? I'm trusting in you more than all the rest of them. I see now what each of them is worth. Tell them everything today orally, I put them directly in your charge. Run around and see them in the morning. Read them my written instructions tomorrow or the day after, collectively, when they become capable of listening again, but, believe me, they'll be capable by tomorrow, because they'll be terribly afraid and become obedient, like wax. Above all, don't you lose heart. Ah, Fyodor Stepanovich, it would be better if you weren't leaving. But it's only for a few days, I'll be back in no time." Fyodor Stepanovich, Urkel uttered cautiously but firmly, even if it's to Petersburg. Since I know you only do what's necessary for the common cause. I expected no less of you, Urkel. If you've guessed that I'm going to Petersburg, then you can understand that it was impossible for me to tell them yesterday, at that moment, that I was going so far, lest I frighten them. You saw for yourself how they were. But you understand that it's for the cause, for the main and important cause, for the common cause, and not to slip away, as some Lipudin might think. But, Fyodor Stepanovich, even if it's abroad, I'd understand, sir, I'd understand that you must preserve your person, because you're everything, and weren't nothing. I'd understand, Fyodor Stepanovich. The poor boy's voice even trembled. Thank you, Urkel. Ow, you touched my bad finger. Urkel had pressed his hand clumsily. The bad finger was attractively bandaged in black taffeta. But I tell you once again positively that I'll just sniff things out in Petersburg, maybe even just overnight, and be back at once. On my return I'll stay at Gaganov's estate, for the sake of appearances. If they think there's danger anywhere, I'll be the first at their head to share it. And if I'm delayed in Petersburg, I'll let you know that same moment, in our usual way, and you can tell them. The second bell rang. Ah, so it's 5 minutes to departure. You know, I wouldn't like the crew here to fall apart. I'm not afraid, don't worry about me. I have enough of these knots in the general net, and there's nothing to value especially, but an extra knot won't hurt anything. However, I'm at ease about you, though I'm leaving you almost alone with these freaks. Don't worry, they won't inform, they won't dare. Ah, you're going today, too, he cried suddenly in quite a different, cheerful voice to a very young man who cheerfully came up to greet him. I didn't know you were also taking the express. Where to, your mamma's? The young man's mamma was a very wealthy landowner of the neighboring province, and the young man was a distant relation of Yulia Mikhailovna's and had spent about 2 weeks visiting our town. No, a bit farther, to R. I'll be living on the train for a good 8 hours. Off to Petersburg, the young man laughed. What makes you think right away that I'm going to Petersburg? Fyodor Stepanovich also laughed still more openly. The young man shook a begloved finger at him. Well, so you've guessed it, Fyodor Stepanovich began whispering to him mysteriously. I have Yulia Mikhailovna's letters, and must run around and see 3 or 4 persons, you know what sort, devil take them, frankly speaking. The devil of a job. But, tell me, why has she turned such a coward? The young man also began whispering. She didn't even let me in yesterday. In my view, she needn't fear for her husband, on the contrary, he made quite an attractive fall there at the fire, even sacrificed his life, so to speak. Well, so it goes, Fyodor Stepanovich laughed. You see, she's afraid they've already written from here. I mean, certain gentlemen. In short, there's mainly Stavrogin, Prince K, I mean. There's a whole story here. Maybe I'll tell you a thing or two on the way, no more than chivalry allows, however. This is my relative, Ensign Urkel, from the district capital. The young man, who had been glancing sideways at Urkel, touched his hat. Urkel made him a bow. You know, Verkhovensky, 8 hours on a train, it's a terrible fate. There's this Berestov going with us in first class, a very funny man, a colonel, from the estate next to mine. He's married to a Garin, née de Garin, and, you know, he's a decent sort. Even has ideas. Only spent 2 days here. A desperate lover of the Zeke. How about it, eh? I've already got my eye on a fourth Pripiklov, our bearded tea merchant, a millionaire, a real one, that is, take my word for it. I'll introduce you, a very interesting bag of goods, we'll have a real laugh. Bezique, with the greatest pleasure, and I'm terribly fond of it on the train, but I'm going second class. Come, not a word of it. Get in with us. I'll tell them right now to shift you to first class. The head conductor does as I say. What have you got, a bag? A rug? Wonderful. Let's go. Fyodor Stepanovich took his bag, rug, and book, and with the greatest readiness moved at once to first class. Urkel helped. The third bell sounded. Well, Urkel, Fyodor Stepanovich hastily, and with a busy look, held out his hand to him for the last time through the car window. Here I am sitting down to play cards with them. But why explain to me, Fyodor Stepanovich? I understand everything, Fyodor Stepanovich. Well, so, it's been a pleasure. The latter suddenly turned away at the call of the young man, who invited him to meet his partners. And that was the last Urkel ever saw of his Fyodor Stepanovich. He returned home quite sad. It was not that he was afraid at Fyodor Stepanovich's abandoning them so suddenly, but he had turned away from him so quickly when that young fop called him, and he might have found something else to say to him besides "it's been a pleasure," or might at least have pressed his hand more firmly. This last was the main thing. Something else was beginning to scratch at his poor little heart, something he himself did not yet understand, something connected with the previous evening. 7. The last peregrination of Stepan Trofimovich. I am convinced that Stepan Trofimovich was very much afraid as he felt the time of his insane undertaking draw near. I am convinced that he suffered very much from fear, especially the night before. That terrible night. Nastasia mentioned later that he had gone to bed late and slept. But that proves nothing. They say men sentenced to death sleep very soundly even the night before their execution. Though he started out with the light of day, when a nervous man always takes heart somewhat, the major, Virginsky's relative, even ceased believing in God as soon as the night was over. I am convinced that he could never before have imagined himself, without horror, alone on the high road and in such a situation. Of course, something desperate in his thoughts probably softened for him, in the beginning, the full force of that terrible feeling of sudden solitude in which he found himself all at once, the moment he left Stacy in the place he had been warming up for 20 years. But, anyhow, even with the clearest awareness of all the horrors awaiting him, he still would have gone out to the high road and gone down it. There was something proud here that he admired despite all. Oh, he could have accepted Varvara Petrovna's luxurious conditions and remained with her bounties, come on mere sponger. But he had not accepted her bounties and had not remained. And now he himself was leaving her and raising the banner of a great idea and going to die for it on the high road. That is precisely how he must have felt about it. That is precisely how his action must have presented itself to him. The question also presented itself to me more than once: why did he precisely run away, that is, run with his feet, in the literal sense, and not simply drive off in a carriage? At first I explained it by 50 years of impracticality and a fantastical deviation of ideas under the effect of strong emotion. It seemed to me that the thought of traveling by post in a carriage, even with bells, must have appeared too simple and prosaic to him. Pilgrimage, on the other hand, even with an umbrella, was much more beautiful and vengefully amorous. But now, when everything is over, I rather suppose that at the time it all happened in a much simpler way. First, he was afraid to hire a carriage because Varvara Petrovna might get wind of it and hold him back by force, which she would certainly have done, and he would certainly have submitted, and then goodbye forever to the great idea. Second, in order to travel by post one must at least know where one is going. But to know this precisely constituted his chief suffering at the moment. He could not name or determine upon a place for the life of him. For if he were to decide upon some town, his undertaking would instantly become both absurd and impossible in his own eyes. He sensed that very well. What was he going to do precisely in this town and not in some other? To look for C.E. Marchand, but what Marchand? Here again that second and now most dreadful question popped up. In fact, there was nothing more dreadful for him than C.E. Marchand, whom he had so suddenly set off headlong in search of, and whom he was quite certainly afraid most of all to find in reality. No, better simply the high road, just simply to go out to it and go down it and not think of anything for as long as it was possible not to think. A high road is something very, very long, which one sees no end to, like human life, like the human dream. There is an idea in the high road, and what sort of idea is there in traveling by post? Traveling by post is the end of any idea. Vive la grande route, and then it's whatever God sends. After the sudden and unexpected meeting with Liza, which I have already described, he went on in even greater self-abandon. The high road passed within a quarter mile of Skvoreshniki, and strangely, he did not even notice at first how he had come upon it. Sound reasoning, or clear awareness at the least, was unbearable to him at that moment. A drizzling rain kept stopping and starting again, but he did not notice the rain either. He also did not notice how he had shouldered his bag, and how this made it easier for him to walk. He must have gone a half or 3/4 of a mile when he suddenly stopped and looked around. Ahead of him the old, black, and deeply rutted road stretched in an endless thread, planted out with its willows, to the right a bare place, fields harvested long, long ago, to the left bushes, and beyond them woods. And far away the faintly noticeable line of the railroad running obliquely, with the smoke of some train on it, but the sound could no longer be heard. Stepan Trofimovich grew a bit timid, but only for a moment. He sighed aimlessly, placed his bag against a willow, and sat down to rest. As he went to sit down, he felt a chill and wrapped himself in a plaid. Then, noticing the rain, he opened the umbrella over him. For quite a long time he went on sitting like that, occasionally munching his lips, the handle of the umbrella grasped tightly in his hand. Various images swept before him in feverish succession, rapidly supplanting one another in his mind. Lise, he thought, and C.E. Maurice with her. Strange people. But what was this strange fire there, and what were they talking about, and who was murdered? I suppose Stacy hasn't had time to find anything out yet and is still waiting for me with coffee. Cards? Did I ever lose people at cards? In our Russia, during the time of so-called serfdom. Ah, my God, and Fedka? He started up in fright and looked around, and what if this? Fedka is sitting here somewhere behind a bush? They say he has a whole band of highway robbers someplace around here. Oh, God, then I'll tell him the whole truth, that I am to blame, and that I sussered for 10 years over him, longer than he was there as a soldier, and I'll give him my purse.
H.M., j'ai en tout 40 roubles, il prendra les roubles et il me tuera tout de même.
In fear he closed his umbrella, who knows why, and laid it down beside him. Far away, on the road from town, some cart appeared. He began peering anxiously. Grâce à Dieu it's a cart, and it's moving slowly, that can't be dangerous. These broken down local nags. I always talked about breeding. It was Pyotr Ilyich, however, who talked about breeding in the club, and then I finessed him, Oedipus, but what's that behind, and, it seems there's a woman in the cart. A woman and a peasant.
Cela commence à être rassurant.
The woman behind and the peasant in front say très rassurant. They have a cow tied behind by the horns, say rassurant au plus haut degré. The cart came abreast of him, a rather sturdy and roomy peasant cart. The woman was sitting on a tightly stuffed sack, the peasant on the driver's seat, his legs hanging over on Stepan Trofimovitch's side. Behind there indeed plodded a red cow tied by the horns. The peasant and the woman stared wide-eyed at Stepan Trofimovitch, and Stepan Trofimovitch stared in the same way at them, but after letting them go on about 20 paces, he suddenly got up in haste and went after them. Naturally, it felt more trustworthy in the vicinity of the cart, but when he caught up with it he at once forgot about everything again and again became immersed in his scraps of thoughts and imaginings. He was striding along and certainly did not suspect that for the peasant and the woman he constituted at that moment the most mysterious and curious object one could meet on the high road. What sorts are you from, if it's not impolite my asking? The wench finally could not help herself, when Stepan Trofimovitch suddenly glanced at her distractedly. She was a wench of about 27, sturdy, black-browed, and ruddy, with kindly smiling red lips, behind which her even, white teeth flashed. You are addressing me?" Stepan Trofimovitch muttered in doleful surprise. "Must be from merchants," the peasant said self-confidently. He was a strapping man of about 40, with a broad, sensible face and a full, reddish beard. "No, I'm not actually a merchant, moi c'est autre chose?" Stepan Trofimovitch parried anyhow, and, just in case, dropped behind a little to the rear of the cart, so that he was now walking next to the cow. Must be from gentlefolk, the peasant decided, hearing non-Russian words, and pulled up on the nag. "So here, to look at you, it's as if you're out for a walk," the wench began to pry again. Is it me you're asking? There's visiting foreigners come by rail sometimes. You're not from these parts with boots like that. Military type, the peasant put in, complacently and significantly. "No, I'm not actually from the military, What a curious wench, Stepan Trofimovitch thought vexedly, and how they're studying me, mais, enfin. Strange, in a word, just as if I were guilty before them, yet I'm not guilty of anything before them." The wench whispered with the peasant. "No offense, but we could maybe give you a lift, if only it's agreeable." Stepan Trofimovitch suddenly recollected himself. Yes, my friends, with great pleasure, because I'm very tired, only how am I to get in?" How amazing, he thought to himself, I've been walking next to this cow for such a long time, and it never occurred to me to ask if I could ride with them. This real life has something rather characteristic about it. The peasant, however, still did not stop his horse. "And where are you headed for?" he inquired, with some mistrust. Stepan Trofimovitch did not understand at once. "Kotovo, must be? Kotov? No, not actually to Kotov. And I'm not quite acquainted, I've heard of him, though. It's a village, Kotovo, a village, 5 miles from here." "A village? C'est charmant, I do believe I've heard." Stepan Trofimovitch was still walking, and they still did not let him get in. A brilliant surmise flashed in his head. you think, perhaps, that I have a passport, and I am a professor, that is, a teacher, if you wish, but a head one. I am a head teacher. Oui, c'est comme si qu'on peut traduire. I would very much like to get in, and I'll buy you a pint for it. It'll be 50 kopecks, sir, it's a rough road. Or else we'd be getting the bad end, the wench put in. 50 kopecks? Very well, then, 50 kopecks.
C'est encore mieux, j'ai en tout 40 roubles, mais, b.
The peasant stopped, and by general effort Stepan Trofimovich was pulled into the cart and seated next to the woman on the sack. The whirl of thoughts would not leave him. At times he sensed in himself that he was somehow terribly distracted and not thinking at all of what he ought to be thinking of, and he marveled at that. This awareness of a morbid weakness of mind at times became very burdensome and even offensive to him. How is it there's a cow behind? He himself suddenly asked the wench. What's with you, mister, never seen one before? The woman laughed. Bought her in town, the peasant intervened. See, our cattle all dropped dead last spring, the plague. They all died, all, not even half was left, cry as you might. And again he whipped up his nag, who had gotten stuck in a rut. Yes, that happens here in Russia, and generally we Russians, well, yes, it happens, Stepan Trofimovich trailed off. If you're a teacher, what do you want in Katovo? Or maybe you're going farther? That is, not actually farther. Seste dire, see to a merchant. To Spacov, must be? Yes, precisely, to Spacov. It makes no difference, however. If you're going to Spacov, and on foot, it'll take you a good week in those pretty boots, the wench laughed. Right, and it makes no difference, Amos, no difference at all, Stepan Trofimovich impatiently cut her short. Terribly curious folk, the wench speaks better than he does, however, and I notice that since the 19th of February 1st their style has changed somewhat, and what do they care if it's Spacov or not Spacov? Anyhow, I'm paying them, so why are they pestering me? If it's Spacov, then it's by steamer boat, the peasant would not leave off. That's right enough, the wench put in animatedly, because with horses along the shore you make a 20-mile detour. 30. You'll just catch the steamer boat in Ustyevo tomorrow at 2 o'clock, the woman clinched. But Stepan Trofimovich remained stubbornly silent. The questioners also fell silent. The peasant kept pulling up on the nag, the woman exchanged brief remarks with him from time to time. Stepan Trofimovich dozed off. He was terribly surprised when the woman, laughing, shook him awake and he saw himself in a rather large village at the front door of a cottage with 3 windows. You dozed off, mister? What's that? Where am I? Ah, well, it makes no difference, Stepan Trofimovich sighed and got out of the cart. He looked around sadly, the village scene seemed strange to him and in some way terribly alien. Ah, the 50 kopecks, I forgot, he turned to the peasant with a somehow exceedingly hasty gesture, by now he was evidently afraid to part with them. Come in, you can pay inside, the peasant invited. It's a nice place, the wench encouraged. Stepan Trofimovich climbed the rickety porch. But how is this possible, he whispered in deep and timorous perplexity, and yet he entered the cottage. LLA Volu, D something stabbed at his heart, and again he suddenly forgot about everything, even that he had entered the cottage. It was a bright, rather clean peasant cottage with 3 windows and 2 rooms, not really an inn, but a sort of guesthouse, where passing acquaintances stopped out of old habit. Stepan Trofimovich, without embarrassment, walked to the front corner, forgot to give any greetings, sat down, and lapsed into thought. Meanwhile, an extremely pleasant sensation of warmth, after 3 hours of dampness on the road, suddenly spread through his body. Even the chill that kept running briefly and abruptly down his spine, as always happens with especially nervous people when they are feverish and pass suddenly from cold to warmth, all at once became somehow strangely pleasant to him. He raised his head, and the sweet smell of hot pancakes, over which the mistress was busying herself at the stove, tickled his nostrils. Smiling a childlike smile, he leaned towards the mistress and suddenly started prattling. "What's this now? Is it pancakes?"
Mais, c'est charmant.
"Do you wish some, mister?" the mistress offered at once and politely. "I do, I precisely wish some, Anne." "I'd also like to ask you for tea." Stepan Trofimovich perked up. "Start the samovar?" "With the greatest pleasure." On a big plate with a bold blue pattern, pancakes appeared, those well-known peasant pancakes, thin, half-wheat, with hot fresh butter poured over them, most delicious pancakes. Stepan Trofimovich sampled them with delight. "How rich and how delicious they are! If only one could have un doit do de vie." "You wish a little vodka, mister?" Precisely, just a bit, un tout petit rein if." 5 kopecks worth, you mean?" 5 kopecks worth, 5, un tout petit rein, Stepan Trofimovich yesed her with a blissful little smile. "Ask a peasant to do something for you, and, if he can and wants to, he will serve you diligently and cordially, but ask him to fetch a little vodka, and his usual calm cordiality suddenly transforms into a sort of hasty, joyful obligingness, almost of family solicitude for you. Someone going to get vodka, though only you are going to drink it, not he, and he knows it beforehand, feels all the same, as it were, some part of your future gratification." In no more than 3 or 4 minutes, the pothouse was 2 steps away. There stood on the table before Stepan Trofimovich a half-pint bottle and a large greenish glass. "And all that for me," he was greatly surprised. "I've always had vodka, but I never knew 5 kopecks worth was so much." He poured a glass, rose, and with a certain solemnity crossed the room to the other corner, where his companion on the sack had settled herself, the black-browed wench who had so pestered him with her questions on the way. The wench was abashed and started making excuses, but, having uttered all that decency prescribed, in the end she rose, drank politely, in 3 sips, as women do, and with a show of great suffering on her face handed the glass back and bowed to Stepan Trofimovich. He pompously returned her bow and went back to his table even with a look of pride. All this happened in him by some sort of inspiration. He himself had not known even a second before that he would go and treat the wench. "My knowledge of how to handle the people is perfect, I always told them so," he thought smugly, pouring himself the remaining drink from the bottle. Though it turned out to be less than a glass, the drink produced a vivifying warmth and even went to his head a little.
Je suis malade tout à fait, mais ce n'est pas trop mauvais d'être malade. J'ai.
"Would you like to buy?" a woman's soft voice came from beside him. He looked up and, to his surprise, saw before him a lady, undémitl avadeler, now past 30, with a very modest look, dressed town fashion in a dark dress, and with a big grey kerchief on her shoulders. There was something very affable in her face, which Stepan Trofimovich immediately liked. She had just come back to the cottage, where she had left her things on a bench next to the place Stepan Trofimovich had taken, among them a briefcase at which, he remembered, he had glanced curiously as he entered, and a not very large oilcloth bag. From this same bag she took 2 handsomely bound books with crosses stamped on the covers and brought them to Stepan Trofimovich. Mais je crois que c'est l'Evangile, I with the greatest pleasure. Ah, I understand now. Vous ici qu'on appelle a bookhacker, I've read of it more than once. 50 kopecks? 35 kopecks each, the bookhacker answered. With the greatest pleasure.
Je n'ai rien contre l'Évangile, etc. Yveolon wanted to reread.
It flitted through him at that moment that he had not read the Gospel for at least 30 years, and had merely recalled a bit of it perhaps 7 years ago only from reading Renaud's book, La Vie de Jesus. 2 As he had no change, he pulled out his 4 10-ruble bills, all he had. The mistress undertook to break one, and only now did he take a better look and notice that a good many people had gathered in the cottage and had all been watching him for some time and seemed to be talking about him. They also discussed the fire in town, the owner of the cart with the cow most of all, since he had just come from there. They were talking about arson, about the Spiegelin men. He never said a word to me about the fire while he was driving me, and yet he talked about everything. It somehow occurred to Stepan Trofimovich. Good sir, Stepan Trofimovich, is it you I see? I really never dreamed. Don't you recognize me? Exclaimed an elderly fellow, an old-time household serf by the looks, with a shaven beard and wearing a greatcoat with long, turned-back lapels. Stepan Trofimovich was frightened at hearing his own name. Excuse me, he muttered, I don't quite remember you. No recollection. But I'm Anisim Ivanov. I served the late Mr. Gaganov, and saw you, sir, many a time with Varvara Petrovna at the late Avdotya Sergeyevna's. I used to come to you from her with books, and twice brought Petersburg candy she sent to you. Ah, yes, I remember you, Anisim. Stepan Trofimovich smiled. So you live here? Near Spasov, sir, by the Viv Monastery, on Marfa Sergeyevna's estate. That's Avdotya Sergeyevna's sister. You may be pleased to remember her. She broke her leg jumping out of a carriage on her way to a ball. She now lives near the monastery, and me with her, sir, and now, if you please, I'm on my way to the provincial capital, to visit my family. Ah, yes, yes. I saw you and it made me glad. You were ever kind to me, sir. Anisim was smiling rapturously. And where is it you're going like this, sir? It seems you're all alone. Seems you never used to go out alone, sir? Stepan Trofimovich looked at him timorously. It mightn't be to our Spasov, sir? Yes, to Spasov.
Il me semble que tout le monde va à Spasov, elle.
It mightn't be to Fyodor Matveevich's? Won't he be glad of you? He had such respect for you in the old days, even now he often remembers you. Yes, yes, to Fyodor Matveevich's. Must be so, sir, must be so. You've got the peasants here marveling. They let on, sir, that they supposedly met you on foot on the high road. Foolish folk, sir. It's... You know, Anisim, I made a wager, as Englishmen do, that I could get there on foot, and I... Sweat stood out on his forehead and temples. Must be so, sir, must be so. Anisim listened with merciless curiosity. But Stepan Trofimovich could not bear it any longer. He was so abashed that he wanted to get up and leave the cottage. But the samovar was brought in, and at the same moment the bookhawker, who had stepped out somewhere, came back. He turned to her with the gesture of a man saving his own life, and offered her tea. Anisim yielded and walked away. Indeed, perplexity had been emerging among the peasants. Who is this man? Found walking down the road, says he's a teacher, dressed like a foreigner, reasons like a little child, answers nonsensically, as if he'd run away from somebody, and he's got money. There was beginning to be some thought of reporting to the authorities, since anyway things are not so quiet in town. But Anisim settled it all that same minute. Stepping out to the front hall, he told everyone who cared to listen that Stepan Trofimovich was not really a teacher, but was himself a great scholar and occupied with great studies, and was a local landowner himself and had lived for the past 22 years with the full general's widow Stavrogin, in place of the chiefest man in the house, and had great respect from everyone in town. He used to leave 50 or 100 rubles of an evening in the gentleman's club, and in rank he was a councillor, which is the same as a lieutenant colonel in the army, just one step lower than full colonel. And that he's got money is because through the full general's widow Stavrogin he has more money than you could count, and so on and so forth. Mais c'est un dame, et de trace comme il faut, Stepan Trofimovich was resting from Anisim's attack, observing with pleasant curiosity his neighbor, the bookhawker, who, however, was drinking her tea from the saucer with sugar on the side. 3 petit morceau de sucre sin rien. There is in her something noble and independent and at the same time quiet. Le comme il faut tout per, only of a somewhat different sort. He soon learned from her that she was Sofia Matveyevna Ulitin, and actually lived in K, where she had a widowed sister, a tradeswoman. She herself was also a widow, and her husband, a sub-lieutenant who had risen to that rank from sergeant major, had been killed at Sebastopol. 4.
But you're so young, vous n'avez pas 30 ans RP.
34, sir, Sofia Matveyevna smiled. So, you also understand French? A little, sir. I lived in a noble house for 4 years after that and picked it up from the children there. She told him that being left after her husband at the age of 18, she had stayed for a while in Sebastopol as a sister of mercy, and had then lived in various places, sir, and now here she was going around selling the gospel. Mais mon Dieu, it wasn't you who were involved in that strange, even very strange, story in our town? She blushed. It turned out to have been she. C.S. Vorians, CES Maluriax, Q. He tried to begin, in a voice trembling with indignation. A painful and hateful recollection echoed tormentingly in his heart. For a moment he became as if oblivious. Ha, she's gone again, he suddenly came to himself, noticing that she was no longer beside him. She steps out frequently and is preoccupied with something. I notice she's even worried. Bah, Jedvians egoist, R. He looked up and again saw Anisim, this time in the most threatening circumstances. The whole cottage was filled with peasants, all apparently dragged there by Anisim. The proprietor was there, and the peasant with the cow, and another 2 peasants. They turned out to be coachmen, and some other half-drunk little man, dressed like a peasant but clean-shaven, who resembled a besotted tradesman and was talking more than anyone else. And they were all discussing him, Stepan Trofimovich. The peasant with the cow stood his ground, insisting that along the shore would be about a 30-mile detour, and that it had to be by steamer boat. The half-drunk tradesman and the proprietor hotly objected. Because, dear brother, if it's by steamer boat, of course, His Excellency will have a closer way across the lake. That's right enough, except the way things are now, the steamer boat may not even go. It'll go for another week. Anisim was the most excited of all. Maybe so. But it doesn't come on schedule, because it's late in the year, and sometimes they wait 3 days in Ustievo. It'll come tomorrow at 2 o'clock it'll come on schedule. You'll get to Spaceoff still before evening, sir, right on schedule. Anisim was turning himself inside out.
Mais qu'est-ce qu'il a, cet homme? Stepan Trofimovich trembled, fearfully awaiting his FATE.
The coachman, too, stepped up and began bargaining. They were asking 3 rubles to Ustievo. Others shouted that he wouldn't be doing badly, that it was the right price, just the same price they charged all summer for going from here to Ustievo. But it's also nice here. And I don't want to, Stepan Trofimovich started mumbling. Right, sir, it's just as you say, right now it's really nice in Spaceoff, and you'll make Fyodor Matveyevich so glad. Mon Dieu, mes Amos, all this is so unexpected for me. At last Sofia Matveevna came back. But she sat on the bench quite crushed and sad. I'm not to be in Spaceoff, she said to the mistress. What, you're going to Spaceoff, too? Stepan Trofimovich roused himself. It turned out that a certain landowner, Nadezhda Yegorovna Svetlitsyn, had told her the day before to wait for her in Kotovo and promised to take her to Spaceoff, and here she had not come. What am I to do now? Sofia Matveevna kept repeating. Mais, ma chère nouvelle amie Ti, too, can take you, as well as any landowner, to this, what is it called, this village I've hired a coach to, and tomorrow, well, tomorrow we'll go to Spaceoff together. But, are you also going to Spaceoff?
Mais que faire, et je suis enchanté.
I shall be extremely glad to take you there. They want to, I've already hired. Which of you did I hire? Stepan Trofimovich suddenly wanted terribly much to go to Spaceoff. A quarter of an hour later they were already getting into the covered britska, he very animated and thoroughly pleased, she with her bag and a grateful smile beside him. Anisim helped them in. Have a good trip, sir, he was bustling with all his might around the britska, it was such gladness you caused us. Goodbye, my friend, goodbye. When you see Fyodor Matveyevich, sir. Yes, my friend, yes. Fyodor Petrovich, and now goodbye. 2. You see, my friend, you will allow me to call you my friend, and Sc. Stepan Trofimovich began hastily, as soon as the britska started.
You aussi, J'aime le peuple, c'est indispensable, mais il me semble que je ne l'avais jamais vu de près.
Stacy, c'est la vie sans dire tu est aussi du peuple, mais le vrai peuple, that is, the real ones, the ones on the high road, it seems to me, care only about where I'm actually going. But let's drop our grudges. It's as if I were straying a little, but that, it seems, is from haste. It seems you're unwell, sir. Sofia Matveevna was studying him keenly but respectfully. No, I just need to wrap myself up, and generally the wind is somehow fresh, even very fresh, but we'll forget that. I mainly wished to say something else. Charity incomparable Amy, it seems to me that I am almost happy, and the one to blame for it is you. Happiness is unprofitable for me, because I immediately set about forgiving all my enemies. But that is very good, sir. Not always, cher innocent. L'Evangile. Voyez-vous, désormais nous le prêcherons ensemble, why, and I'll willingly sell your handsome books. Yes, I feel there's perhaps an idea there, quelque chose de très nouveau dans ce genre de the people are religious, say Admis AA, but they still don't know the gospel. I will expound it to them. In expounding it orally, it is possible to correct the mistakes of this remarkable book, which I, of course, am prepared to treat with great respect. I'll also be useful on the high road. I've always been useful, I've always said so to them and to set sharing Graytebe. Oh, let's forgive, let's first of all forgive all and always. Let's hope that we, too, will be forgiven. Yes, because we are guilty one and all before each other. All are guilty. That, I think, you said very well, if you please, sir. Yes, yes. I feel that I am speaking very well. I will speak very well to them, but what was the main thing I wished to say? I keep getting confused and don't remember. Will you allow me not to part from you? I feel that your eyes in. I'm even surprised at your manners, you're simple-hearted, and you say sir, and you put the cup upside down on the saucer, with that ugly little sugar lump, but there's something lovely in you, and I can see by your features. Oh, don't blush, and don't be afraid of me as a man. Charity incomparable, pour moi une femme c'est tout ici I cannot live without a woman near, but simply near. I'm terribly, terribly confused. I simply cannot remember what I wished to say. Oh, blessed is he to whom God always sends a woman, and I even think I'm in some sort of ecstasy. And on the high road, too, there is a lofty thought. There, that is what I wished to say about the thought, now I've remembered it, and I kept missing it before. But why did they take us farther on? It was nice there, too, and here.
Cela devient trop froid.
A propos, JN tout 40 rubles et voilà cet argent, and take it, I don't know how, I'll lose it, they'll take it from me, and it seems to me I want to sleep, something is spinning in my head. Just spinning, spinning, spinning. Oh, how kind you are, what's that you're covering me with? You must be in a real fever, sir, and I've covered you with my blanket, only about the money, sir, I'd. Oh, for God's sake, en parlance plus, parce que cela me fait mal, oh, how kind you are. He somehow quickly interrupted his speaking and fell asleep extremely soon, in a feverish, shivering sleep. The country road they drove on for those 10 miles was not a smooth one, and the carriage jolted cruelly. Stepan Trofimovich woke up frequently, raised himself quickly from the small pillow Sofia Matveyevna had slipped under his head, seized her hand, and asked, "Are you here?" As if he feared she might leave him. He also insisted that he had seen some gaping jaws with teeth in a dream and had found it very repulsive. Sofia Matveyevna was greatly worried for him. The coachman drove them straight up to a big cottage with 4 windows and wings of rooms in the yard. The awakened Stepan Trofimovich hurriedly walked in and went straight to the second room, the best and most spacious in the house. His sleepy face acquired a most bustling expression. He explained at once to the mistress, a tall and sturdy woman of about 40 with very black hair and all but a mustache, that he required the whole room for himself and that the door be shut and no one be let in, parce que nous avons un parleur af.
Oui, j'ai beaucoup à vous dire, cher ami. Agillpayu.
He waved the mistress away. Though he was hurrying, he moved his tongue somehow stimmy. The mistress listened with displeasure, but in token of agreement kept her silence, in which, however, one could sense a certain menace. He noticed none of this and hurriedly, he was in a terrible hurry, requested that she go and serve dinner at once as soon as possible, without the least delay. Here the woman with the mustache could bear it no longer. This isn't an inn, mister, we don't serve dinners for travelers. Some boiled crayfish or a samovar, we have nothing else. There won't be fresh fish till tomorrow. But Stepan Trofimovich began waving his arms, repeating with wrathful impatience, I'll pay, only be quick, be quick. They settled on fish soup and roast chicken. The landlady declared that there was not a chicken to be found in the whole village. However, she agreed to go and look, but with an air as though she were doing an extraordinary favor. As soon as she left, Stepan Trofimovich instantly sat down on the sofa and sat Sofia Matveyevna down next to him. There were both armchairs and a sofa in the room, but of dreadful appearance. Generally, the whole room, rather spacious, with a partition behind which stood a bed, with its yellow, old, torn wallpaper, with dreadful mythological lithographs on the walls, with a long row of icons in bronze triptychs 5 in the front corner, with its strange assortment of furniture, presented an unsightly mixture of the urban and the aboriginally peasant. But he did not even glance at it all, did not even look out the window at the vast lake which began about 70 feet from the cottage. At last we're by ourselves, and we won't let anyone in. I want to tell you everything, from the very beginning. Sofia Matveyevna stopped him, even with strong uneasiness. Is it known to you, Stepan Trofimovich?
Comment, vous savez déjà mon nom?
Ah, he smiled joyfully. I heard it today from Anisim Ivanovich, when you were talking with him. But this, for my part, I will be so bold as to tell you. And in a quick whisper, glancing back at the closed door to be sure no one was eavesdropping, she told him that here, in this village, there is trouble, sir. That all the local peasants, though fishermen, in fact make a business of charging summer visitors whatever price they like. The village is not on a main route, but is out of the way, and the only reason to come here is that the steamer stops here, but when the steamer does not come, as always happens the moment the weather turns bad, there will be a crowd of people waiting for several days, and then all the houses in the village will be occupied, and that is just what the owners wait for, because they triple the price for everything, and the proprietor here is proud and haughty, because he is very rich for these parts. His net alone is worth 1,000 rubles. Stepan Trofimovich looked into Sofia Matveyevna's extremely animated face all but with reproach, and several times made a gesture to stop her. But she held her own and finished. According to what she said, she had already come there in the summer with one very noble lady, sir, from town, and had also stayed overnight waiting for the steamer to come, even 2 whole days, sir, and had suffered such grief that it was terrible to remember. Now you, Stepan Trofimovich, were pleased to ask for this room for yourself alone, sir? It's just to warn you, sir. There, in the other room, there are already guests, an elderly man, a young man, and also some lady with children, and by tomorrow before 2 o'clock there'll be a houseful, because if there hasn't been a steamer for 2 days, it will surely come tomorrow. So for a separate room, and for having just asked for dinner, sir, and for making it bad for the other guests, they'll demand so much from you that it's even unheard of in the capitals, sir. But he was suffering, truly suffering.
Assez, mon enfant, après you, nous avons notre argent, et après le bon Dieu.
And I'm even surprised that you, with the loftiness of your notions. Assez, vous me tourmentez, ai, he said hysterically, our whole future is ahead of us, and you make me fear for the future. He immediately began telling the whole story, hurrying so much that at first it was even hard to understand. It took a long time. The fish soup was served, the chicken was served, the samovar, finally, was served, and he went on talking. What came out was somewhat strange and morbid, but he was indeed ill. This was a sudden straining of his mental powers, which, of course, and Sofia Matveyevna foresaw it with anguish throughout his story, could not but lead immediately afterwards to a great loss of strength in his already unsettled organism. He started almost from childhood, when with fresh breast he ran over the fields. Only an hour later did he reach his 2 marriages and Berlin life. I would not dream of laughing, however. There was something truly lofty for him here and, to use the newest language, almost a struggle for existence. He saw before him her whom he had already pre-elected for his future path, and he was hastening to initiate her, so to speak. His genius must no longer remain a secret to her. Perhaps he was greatly exaggerating with regard to Sofia Matveyevna, but he had already elected her. He could not be without a woman. He himself saw clearly from her face that she hardly understood him at all, even in the most capital things. Sune Rain, nu Satendrins AJ, and meanwhile she can understand by intuition. My friend, all I need is your heart alone, he kept exclaiming, interrupting his narrative, and this dear, charming look with which you are gazing at me now. Oh, do not blush. I've already told you. The fogginess increased greatly for poor, trapped Sofia Matveyevna when the story turned almost into a whole dissertation on the subject of how no one had ever been able to understand Stepan Trofimovich and of how talents perish in our Russia. It was also very intelligent, she later reported dejectedly. She listened with obvious suffering, her eyes slightly popping out. And when Stepan Trofimovich threw himself into humor and the wittiest barbs concerning our progressive and dominating ones, she made an attempt, from grief, to smile a couple of times in response to his laughter, but it came out worse than tears, so that in the end Stepan Trofimovich himself became abashed and struck out with even greater passion in spite at the nihilists and new people. Here he simply frightened her, and she only got a bit of respite, though a most deceptive one, when the romance proper began. A woman is always a woman, be she even a nun. She smiled, shook her head, blushed deeply all at once and lowered her eyes, thereby sending Stepan Trofimovich into utter admiration and inspiration, so that he even added quite a lot. His Varvara Petrovna came out as a most lovely brunette, the admiration of Petersburg and a great many European capitals, and her husband had died, cut down by a bullet at Sebastopol, solely because he felt unworthy of her love, giving way to his rival, that is, to the same Stepan Trofimovich. Do not be embarrassed, my quiet one, my Christian, he exclaimed to Sofia Matveyevna, himself almost believing everything he was telling her. This was something lofty, something so fine that not even once in our lives did we declare it. The reason for such a state of affairs turned out in the ensuing narrative to be a blonde, if not Daria Pavlovna. I really don't know whom Stepan Trofimovich meant. This blonde owed everything to the brunette and, being a distant relation, had grown up in her house. The brunette, having finally noticed the blonde's love for Stepan Trofimovich, withdrew into herself. The blonde, for her part, noticing the brunette's love for Stepan Trofimovich, also withdrew into herself. And so all three of them, languishing in mutual magnanimity, were silent like this for 20 years, withdrawn into themselves. Oh, what a passion it was, oh, what a passion, he kept exclaiming, gasping in the most genuine rapture. I saw the full blossom of her, the brunette's, beauty, daily with a sprain in my heart I saw her passing by me, as if ashamed of her loveliness. Once he said, ashamed of her portliness. At last, he had run away, abandoning all this feverish 20-year dream.
20 ans.
And now, on the high road. Then, in some sort of inflammation of the brain, he began explaining to Sofia Matveyevna what must be the significance of their meeting that day, so accidentally and so fatefully, unto ages of ages. Sofia Matveevna, in terrible embarrassment, finally got up from the sofa. He even made an attempt to go on his knees before her, at which she burst into tears. Twilight was gathering. The two had already spent several hours in the closed room. "No, you'd better let me go to the other room, sir," she murmured, "or else people might think something." She finally tore herself away. He let her go, giving his word that he would go to bed at once. As he was saying good night, he complained of a bad headache. Sofia Matveevna had left her bag and things in the first room when she came in, intending to spend the night with the proprietors, but she did not manage to get any rest. During the night, Stepan Trofimovich had an attack of that cholerine so well known to me and to all his friends, the usual outcome with him of any nervous strain or moral shock. Poor Sofia Matveevna did not sleep all night. Since, attending to the sick man, she had to go in and out of the cottage fairly often through the proprietor's room, the guests and the mistress who were sleeping there kept grumbling and finally even began to curse when she decided towards morning to start the samovar. Stepan Trofimovich was half oblivious throughout the attack. At times he as if fancied that the samovar was being prepared, that he was being given something to drink, raspberry tea, that something warm was being put on his stomach, his chest. But he felt almost every moment that she was there by him, that it was she coming and going, getting him out of bed and putting him back in. By 3 o'clock in the morning he felt better. He sat up, lowered his legs from the bed, and, not thinking of anything, collapsed on the floor in front of her. This was no longer the former kneeling. He simply fell at her feet and kissed the hem of her dress. "You mustn't, sir, I'm not worthy at all," she murmured, trying to lift him back into bed. "My savior," he clasped his hands reverently before her.
Vous êtes noble comme une marquise.
I am a blackguard. Oh, I have been dishonest all my life. Calm yourself, Sofia Matveevna pleaded. What I told you earlier was all lies, for glory, for magnificence, out of idleness, all, to the last word. Oh, blackguard, blackguard. The cholerine thus turned into another attack, one of hysterical self-condemnation. I have already mentioned these attacks in speaking of his letters to Varvara Petrovna. He suddenly remembered their meeting the previous morning. It was so terrible, and there must have been some misfortune, and I didn't ask, I didn't find out. I thought only of myself. Oh, what happened to her? Do you know what happened to her? He besought Sofia Matveevna. Then he swore that he would not betray, that he would return to her, that is, to Varvara Petrovna. We shall go up to her porch, all this, that is, with Sofia Matveevna, every day, as she's getting into her carriage to go for a morning promenade, and secretly watch. Oh, I wish her to strike me on the other cheek, it delights me to wish it. I'll turn my other cheek to her come dawn votre lever, only now do I understand what it means to offer the other cheek. 6 I never understood before. For Sofia Matveevna there followed two of the most frightful days of her life. Even now she shudders to recall them. Stepan Trofimovich became so seriously ill that he could not go on the steamer, which this time came on schedule at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. To leave him alone was more than she could do, so she did not go to Spasov either. By her account, he was even very glad when the steamer left. "Well, that's fine, that's wonderful," he muttered from the bed, "and I kept being afraid we would have to go. It's so nice here, it's better than anywhere." "You won't leave me?" "Oh, you haven't left me." Here, however, was not so nice at all. He did not want to know anything about her décolletés. His head was filled with nothing but fantasies. His illness he considered a fleeting thing, a trifle, and he gave no thought to it, but thought only of how they would go and sell these books. He asked her to read him the Gospel. "It's a long time since I've read it, in the original. Otherwise someone may ask and I'll make a mistake. One must also be prepared, after all." She sat down beside him and opened the book. "You read beautifully," he interrupted her at the very first line. I see, I was not mistaken," he added obscurely but rapturously. And generally he was in a constant state of rapture. She read the Sermon on the Mount. Point 7. Assez, mon enfant, am enough. You can't think that is not enough. And he closed his eyes strengthlessly. He was very weak, but did not yet lose consciousness. Sofia Matveevna moved to get up, thinking he wanted to sleep. But he stopped her. "My friend, I've been lying all my life. Even when I was telling the truth. I never spoke for the truth, but only for myself. I knew that before, but only now do I see. Oh, where are those friends whom I have insulted with my friendship all my life? And everyone. Saves vous, and perhaps I'm lying now, certainly I'm also lying now. The worst of it is that I believe myself when I lie. The most occult thing in life is to live and not lie, and not believe one's own lie. Yes, that's precisely it. But wait, that's all for later. You and I together, he added with enthusiasm. Stepan Trofimovich, Sofia Matveevna asked timidly, shouldn't we send to the big town for a doctor? He was terribly struck. What for?
Est-ce que je suis si malade?
Mais rien de sérieux.ao, and what do we need strangers for? People will find out, and what will happen then? No strangers, you and I together. You know, he said after a silence, read me something more, just so, don't choose something, wherever your eye falls. Sofia Matveevna opened and started to read. Wherever it opens, wherever it happens to open, he repeated. And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, 8 what? What is that? From where? It's from the Apocalypse.
Oh, je m'en souviens, oui, l'Apocalypse.
Lai says, AP, I want to divine our future by the book, I want to know what comes out, read from the angel. And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creation. I know your works, you are neither cold nor hot. Would that you were cold or hot. So, because you are lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, not knowing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. That is in your book, he exclaimed, flashing his eyes and raising himself from his pillow. I never knew that great place. Do you hear, sooner cold than lukewarm, than only lukewarm. Oh, I'll prove to them. Only don't leave me alone. We'll prove to them. No, I won't leave you, Stepan Trofimovich, I'll never leave you, sir. She seized his hands and pressed them in hers, bringing them to her heart, looking at him with tears in her eyes. I pitied him so very much at that moment, she recounted later. His lips quivered as if convulsively. However, Stepan Trofimovich, what are we going to do, sir? Shouldn't we let some one of your acquaintances know, or maybe your relations? But at this he became so frightened that she regretted mentioning it. He implored her, trembling and shaking, not to send for anyone, not to do anything. He made her promise, he insisted, no one, no one. We alone, only alone, Nous Partirons Ensemble AQ. Another very bad thing was that the proprietors also began to worry, grumbling, and pestering Sofia Matveevna. She paid them and made sure they saw she had money. This softened them for a time, but the proprietor demanded Stepan Trofimovitch's identity. With a haughty smile the sick man pointed to his little bag. In it Sofia Matveevna found the certificate of his resignation or something of the sort, with which he had lived all his life. The proprietor would not leave off and said that he ought to be put someplace or other, because we're not a hospital, and if he dies there might be consequences, we'd all be in for it. Sofia Matveevna tried to speak with him about a doctor, but it turned out that sending to the big town would be so expensive that any thought of a doctor had, of course, to be abandoned. In anguish she went back to her patient. Stepan Trofimovitch was growing weaker and weaker. Now read me one more passage, about the swine, he said suddenly. What, sir? Sofia Matveevna was terribly frightened. About the swine, it's there, Cesko concert. I remember, demons entered into the swine and they all drowned. You must read it to me, I'll tell you why afterwards. I want to recall it literally. I need it literally. Sofia Matveevna knew the Gospel well and immediately found in Luke the same passage I have placed as an epigraph to my chronicle. I quote it here again. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them leave. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled, and told it in the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened, and they came to Jesus, and found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how he who had been possessed with demons was healed. My friend, Stepan Trofimovitch said in great excitement, Saves vous, this wonderful and extraordinary passage has been a stumbling block for me all my life, Don ce livre, so that I have remembered this passage ever since childhood. And now a thought has occurred to me, uncomparaison. Terribly many thoughts occur to me now, you see, it's exactly like our Russia. These demons who come out of a sick man and enter into swine, it's all the sores, all the miasmas, all the uncleanness, all the big and little demons accumulated in our great and dear sick man, in our Russia, for centuries. We, set Russie kjimis to jurs.as, but a great will and a great thought will descend to her from on high, as upon that insane demoniac, and out will come all these demons, all the uncleanness, all the abomination that is festering on the surface, and they will beg of themselves to enter into swine. And perhaps they already have. It is us, and them, and Petrusha, it les autres avec Louis at an eye, perhaps, first, at the head, and we will rush, insane and raging, from the cliff down into the sea, and all be drowned, and good riddance to us, because that's the most we're fit for. But the sick man will be healed and sit at the feet of Jesus, and everyone will look in amazement. Dear, vous comprendrez après, but it excites me very much now. Vous comprendrez après. Nous comprendrons ensemble. He became delirious and finally lost consciousness. It continued thus all the next day. Sofia Matveevna sat beside him and wept. This being the third night she went almost without sleep, and avoided being seen by the proprietors, who, as she sensed, were already up to something. Deliverance followed only on the third day. That morning Stepan Trofimovich came to, recognized her, and gave her his hand. She crossed herself in hope. He wished to look out the window. Tiens, unlack, Evie, he said. Ah, my God, I haven't even seen it yet. At that moment someone's carriage clattered at the front door and a great hubbub arose in the house. 3. It was Varvara Petrovna herself, arriving in a 4-place coach and 4, with 2 footmen and Darya Pavlovna. The miracle had come about simply. Anisim, dying of curiosity, on his arrival in town, did after all go the next day to Varvara Petrovna's house, and blabbed to the servants that he had met Stepan Trofimovich alone in a village, that peasants had seen him on the high road, alone, on foot, and that he had set out for Spasov, by way of Ostyevo, together with Sofia Matveevna. Since Varvara Petrovna, for her part, was already terribly worried, and was searching as well as she could for her runaway friend, she was informed at once about Anisim. Having listened to him and, chiefly, to the details of the departure for Ostyevo together with some Sofia Matveevna in the same britska, she instantly got ready and, following the still warm tracks, came rolling into Ostyevo herself. She knew nothing as yet of his illness. Her stern and commanding voice rang out, even the proprietors quailed. She had stopped just to make inquiries and find things out, being certain that Stepan Trofimovich had long been in Spasov. Learning that he was there and ill, she worriedly entered the cottage. "Well, where is he?" "Ah, it's you," she cried, seeing Sofia Matveevna, who just at that moment appeared in the doorway of the second room. "I could tell by your shameless face that it was you. Out, vile creature! Don't let a trace of her remain in the house. Drive her out, or else, my girl, I'll tuck you away in jail for good. Guard her meanwhile in another house. She already once spent time in jail in our town, and she can spend some more. And I ask you, landlord, not to dare let anyone in while I'm here. I am General Stavrogin's widow and I am taking the whole house. And you, my dearest, will account to me for everything." The familiar sounds shocked Stepan Trofimovich. He trembled. But she had already come behind the partition. Flashing her eyes, she drew up a chair with her foot and, sitting back in it, shouted to Dasha. "Go out for a while, stay with the proprietors. What is this curiosity? And do close the door tightly behind you." For some time she peered silently and with a sort of predatory look into his frightened face. "Well, how are you doing, Stepan Trofimovich?" "Had a nice little spree," suddenly burst from her with furious irony. "Cher," Stepan Trofimovich babbled, hardly aware of himself, "I've come to know Russian real life. Etje precherai el evangel, ah." "Oh, shameless, ignoble man," she suddenly cried out, clasping her hands. "It wasn't enough for you to disgrace me, you had to get mixed up with. Oh, you old, shameless profligate."
Cher?
His voice broke off, and he was unable to utter a sound, but only stared, his eyes popping with terror. "What is she?"
C'est un ange. C'était plus qu'un ange pour moi Aix all night she. Oh, don't shoot, don't frighten her, cher, cher.
Varvara Petrovna suddenly jumped up from her chair with a clatter, her frightened cry rang out, "Water, water!" Though he came to, she was still trembling from fear and, pale, was looking at his distorted face. Only here for the first time did she get some idea of the extent of his illness. "Darya," she suddenly started whispering to Darya Pavlovna, "send immediately for the doctor, for Salzfish, let Yegorik go at once, let him hire horses here, and take another coach from town." They must be here by nighttime. Dasha rushed to carry out the order. Stepan Trofimovich went on staring with the same popping, frightened eyes. His white lips were trembling. "Wait, Stepan Trofimovich, wait, my dearest," she was coaxing him like a child. "Just wait, wait, Daria will come back in." "Ah, my God, mistress, mistress, you come at least, my dear." In her impatience she ran to the mistress herself. "Right now, this minute, that woman must come back. Bring her back, bring her back." Fortunately, Sofia Matveevna had not yet had time to get far from the house and was just going out the gate with her bag and bundle. They brought her back. She was so frightened that her legs and hands even shook. Varvara Petrovna seized her by the hand, like a hawk seizing a chicken, and dragged her impetuously to Stepan Trofimovich. "Well, here she is for you. I didn't eat her. You must have thought I'd simply eaten her." Stepan Trofimovich seized Varvara Petrovna by the hand, brought it to his eyes, and dissolved in tears, sobbing morbidly, fitfully. "Well, calm yourself, my dear, my dearest." "Ah, my God, but do calm yourself," she cried furiously. "Oh, tormentor, tormentor, my eternal tormentor." "Dear," Stepan Trofimovich finally murmured, addressing Sofia Matveevna, "stay out there, dear, I want to say something here." Sofia Matveevna hastened out at once. Sherry, he was suffocating. "Wait before you talk, Stepan Trofimovich, wait a little and rest meanwhile. Here's water." "Why, ate," I said. She sat down on the chair again. Stepan Trofimovich held her firmly by the hand. For a long time she would not let him talk. He brought her hand to his lips and began to kiss it. She clenched her teeth, looking off into a corner.
Je vous aimais.
I escaped him finally. She had never heard such a word from him, spoken in such a way. She grunted in reply.
Je vous aimais toute ma vie, 20 ans.
A.Z. She remained silent 2 minutes, 3. "And sprayed yourself with perfume, getting ready for Dasha," she suddenly said in a terrible whisper. Stepan Trofimovich simply froze. "Put on a new tie." Again about 2 minutes of silence. "Remember the little cigar?" "My friend," he began mumbling in terror. "The little cigar, in the evening, by the window, in the moonlight, after the gazebo, in Skvoreshniki? Do you remember?" "Do you remember?" She jumped up from her place, seizing his pillow by 2 corners and shaking his head together with it. "Do you remember, you empty, inglorious, faint-hearted, eternally empty man?" she spat out in her furious whisper, keeping herself from shouting. Finally she dropped him and fell onto the chair, covering her face with her hands. "Enough," she snapped, straightening up. 20 years are gone, there's no bringing them back. I'm a fool, too. Je vous aimais, he again clasped his hands. "Why keep at me with your aimais? Enough," she jumped up again. "And if you don't go to sleep right now, I'll. You need rest, go to sleep right now, close your eyes." "Ah, my God, maybe he wants to have lunch." "What do you eat?" "What does he eat?" "Ah, my God, where's that woman? Where is she?" A hubbub began. But Stepan Trofimovich murmured in a weak voice that he would indeed like to sleep for an hour, and then, un bouillon, on the Enfin Illinois Estase Hero.ba he lay back and indeed seemed to fall asleep. He was probably pretending. Varvara Petrovna waited a little and then tiptoed out from behind the partition. She sat down in the proprietor's room, chased the proprietors out, and ordered Dasha to bring her that woman. A serious interrogation began. "Now, my girl, tell me all the details, sit beside me, so." "Well, I met Stepan Trofimovich." "Wait, stop. I warn you that if you lie or hold anything back, I'll dig you up out of the ground." "Well, Stepan Trofimovich and I, as soon as I came to Kotovo, ma'am, Sofia Matveyevna was almost suffocating." "Wait, stop, be quiet, what's all this stammering? First of all, what sort of bird are you?" The woman told her haphazardly, though in the briefest terms, about herself, beginning with Sebastopol. Varvara Petrovna listened silently, sitting straight-backed on her chair, looking sternly and steadily straight into the narrator's eyes. "Why are you so cowed? Why do you look at the ground? I like people who look straight and argue with me. Go on." She finished telling about their meeting, about the books, about how Stepan Trofimovich treated the peasant woman to vodka. Right, don't leave out the smallest detail," Varvara Petrovna encouraged her. Finally, she told of how they had set off and how Stepan Trofimovich had kept talking, already completely sick, ma'am, and even spent several hours here telling her his whole life from the very first beginning. "Tell me about the life." Sofia Matveyevna suddenly faltered and was completely nonplussed. "I couldn't say anything about that, ma'am," she spoke all but in tears, "and, besides, I hardly understood anything." "Lies, it's impossible that you understood nothing at all." "He was telling for a long time about some black-haired noble lady, ma'am." Sofia Matveyevna blushed terribly, incidentally noticing Varvara Petrovna's fair hair and her total lack of resemblance to the brunette. "Black-haired? What, precisely? Speak." "How this noble lady was very much in love with him, ma'am, all her life, a whole 20 years, but she didn't dare open her heart and was ashamed before him, because she was very portly, ma'am." "Fool!" Varvara Petrovna snapped out, pensively but resolutely. Sofia Matveyevna was now completely in tears. "I can't tell anything right about it, because I myself was in great fear for him and couldn't understand him, since he's such an intelligent man." "It's not for a crow like you to judge his intelligence." "Did he offer you his hand?" The narrator trembled. "Did he fall in love with you? Speak! He offered you his hand?" Varvara Petrovna yelled. "That's nearly how it was, ma'am," she sobbed. "Only I took it all for nothing, on account of his illness," she added firmly, raising her eyes. "What is your name and patronymic?" "Sofia Matveyevna, ma'am." "Let it be known to you, then, Sofia Matveyevna, that he is the paltriest, the emptiest little man." Lord! Do you take me for some vile creature?" The woman goggled her eyes. "A vile creature, a tyrant? Who ruined his life?" "How could that be, ma'am, seeing you yourself are weeping?" Varvara Petrovna did indeed have tears in her eyes. "Well, sit down, don't be frightened. Look me in the eyes again, straight. Why are you blushing? Dasha, come here, look at her. What do you think, is her heart pure?" And to Sofia Matveyevna's surprise, and perhaps still greater fright, she suddenly patted her on the cheek. "Only it's a pity you're a fool. Too great a fool for your years. Very well, my dear, I shall concern myself with you. I see that this is all nonsense. Stay nearby for the time being, lodgings will be rented, and I'll provide board and everything, till I ask for you." The frightened Sofia Matveevna tried to peep that she must hurry. "You don't have to hurry anywhere. I'm buying all your books, and you can stay here. Quiet, no excuses. After all, if I hadn't come, you wouldn't have left him, would you?" "I wouldn't have left him for anything, ma'am," Sofia Matveevna said softly and firmly, wiping her eyes. It was late at night when Dr. Salzfish was brought. He was a rather venerable old man, and quite an experienced practitioner, who had recently lost his docile position in our town as the result of some ambitious quarrel with his superiors. Varvara Petrovna had instantly begun patronizing him with all her might. He examined the patient attentively, asked questions, and cautiously announced to Varvara Petrovna that the sufferer's condition was quite doubtful, owing to the occurrence of a complication in the illness, and that one must expect even all the worst. Varvara Petrovna, who in 20 years had grown unaccustomed even to thinking that anything serious and decisive could proceed from Stepan Trofimovich personally, was deeply shaken, and even turned pale. "Is there really no hope? How could it be that there is by no means not any hope at all, but—" She did not go to bed that night and could barely wait until morning. As soon as the sick man opened his eyes and regained consciousness, he had been conscious all the while, though he was growing weaker by the hour, she accosted him with the most resolute air. "Stepan Trofimovich, one must foresee everything. I have sent for a priest. You have to fulfill your duty." Knowing his convictions, she greatly feared a refusal. He looked at her in surprise. "Nonsense, nonsense," she cried out, thinking he was already refusing. "This is no time for mischief. Enough foolery." "But, am I really so ill?" He pensively agreed. "And, generally, I was greatly surprised to learn afterwards from Varvara Petrovna that he was not in the least afraid of death. Perhaps he simply did not believe it and continued to regard his illness as a trifle. He confessed and took communion quite willingly. Everyone, including Sofia Matveevna, and even the servants, came to congratulate him on receiving the Holy Sacrament. Everyone to a man wept restrainedly, looking at his pinched and worn-out face and his pale, quivering lips. "Oui, mes amis, and I am only surprised that you are fussing so. Tomorrow I'll probably get up and we'll set off. Tout cette cérémonie, which, to be sure, I give all its due, has been." "I beg you, father, to be sure to stay with the sick man." Varvara Petrovna quickly stopped the priest, who was already taking off his vestments. "As soon as tea has been served, I beg you to start talking immediately about things divine, to bolster his faith." The priest started to speak. Everyone was sitting or standing near the sick man's bed. "In our sinful times," the priest began smoothly, a cup of tea in his hands, "faith in the Most High is the only refuge for mankind in all the trials and tribulations of life, as well as in the hope of eternal bliss promised to the righteous." Stepan Trofimovich grew all animated, as it were, a subtle smile flitted across his lips.
Mon père, je vous remercie, et vous êtes bien bon, mais, baissez.
No mais at all.
Varvara Petrovna exclaimed, leaping from her chair. "Father," she turned to the priest, this is the sort of man, the sort of man, he'll have to be reconfessed again in an hour. That's the sort of man he is. Stepan Trofimovich smiled restrainedly. My friends, he said, God is necessary for me if only because he is the one being who can be loved eternally. Either he had really come to believe, or the majestic ceremony of the performed sacrament had shaken him and aroused the artistic receptivity of his nature, but he uttered firmly and, they say, with great feeling, a few words which went directly against many of his former convictions. My immortality is necessary if only because God will not want to do an injustice and utterly extinguish the fire of love for him once kindled in my heart. And what is more precious than love? Love is higher than being, love is the crown of being, and is it possible for being not to bow before it? If I have come to love him and rejoice in my love, is it possible that he should extinguish both me and my joy and turn us to naught? If there is God, then I am immortal.
Voilà ma profession de foi. BD.
There is God, Stepan Trofimovich, I assure you there is, Varvara Petrovna implored. Give up, drop all your silliness at least once in your life. It seemed she had not quite understood his profession d'foi. My friend, he was growing more and more animated, though his voice broke frequently. My friend, when I understood, that turned cheek, I write that I also understood something else. J'ai meditado ma vie ubl all my life. And I'd like, tomorrow, though. Tomorrow we shall all set off. Varvara Petrovna began to weep. He was searching for someone with his eyes. She's here she is, she seized Sofia Matveevna by the hand and brought her to him. He smiled tenderly. Oh, I wish so much to live again, he exclaimed, with an extraordinary rush of energy. Each minute, each instant of life should be blessedness for man, surely they should. It is man's own duty to arrange it so, it is his law, a hidden but a surely existing one. Oh, I wish to see Petrusha, and all of them, and Shatov. I will note that neither Daria Pavlovna, nor Varvara Petrovna, nor even Salzfish, the latest to come from town, knew anything yet about Shatov. Stepan Trofimovich was growing more and more excited, morbidly so, beyond his strength. The one constant thought that there exists something immeasurably more just and happy than I, fills the whole of me with immeasurable tenderness and glory. Oh, whoever I am, whatever I do. Far more than his own happiness, it is necessary for a man to know and believe every moment that there is somewhere a perfect and peaceful happiness, for everyone and for everything. The whole law of human existence consists in nothing other than a man's always being able to bow before the immeasurably great. If people are deprived of the immeasurably great, they will not live and will die in despair. The immeasurable and infinite is as necessary for man as the small planet he inhabits. My friends, all of you, long live the great thought. The eternal, immeasurable thought. For every man, whoever he is, it is necessary to bow before that which is the great thought. Even the stupidest man needs at least something great. Petrusha. Oh, how I want to see them all again. They don't know that they, too, have in them the same eternal great thought. Dr. Salzfish had not been present at the ceremony. Coming in suddenly, he was horrified and dispersed the gathering, insisting that the sick man should not be disturbed. Stepan Trofimovich died 3 days later, by then completely unconscious. He somehow quietly went out, like a burnt-down candle. Varvara Petrovna, after having the funeral service performed there, transferred the body of her poor friend to Skvoreshniki. His grave is within the churchyard and is already covered with a marble slab. The inscription and railing have been left till spring. In all, Varvara Petrovna's absence from town had lasted some 8 days. Along with her, sitting beside her in the carriage, there also arrived Sofia Matveevna, who seemed to have settled with her for good. I will note that as soon as Stepan Trofimovich lost consciousness, that same morning, Varvara Petrovna immediately had Sofia Matveevna removed again, out of the cottage entirely, and tended the sick man herself, alone to the end, but the moment he gave up the ghost, she immediately summoned her. She refused to listen to any objections, terribly frightened though the woman was by her order, rather, to settle in Skvoreshniki for good. That's all nonsense. I myself will go around selling gospels with you. I have no one in the world now. You do have a son, however, Salzfish attempted to observe. I have no son. Varvara Petrovna snapped out as if prophetically. 8. Conclusion. All the perpetrated outrages and crimes were discovered extraordinarily quickly, far more quickly than Fyodor Stepanovich had supposed. It began with the unfortunate Maria Ignatievna, who woke up before dawn on the night of her husband's murder, found him missing, and became indescribably worried at not seeing him beside her. The serving woman Irina Prokhorovna had hired then was spending the night with her. She simply could not calm her down and, as soon as day broke, went running for Irina Prokhorovna herself, assuring the sick woman that she would know where her husband was and when he would be back. Meanwhile, Irina Prokhorovna had troubles of her own. She had already learned from her husband about the night's exploit at Skvoreshniki. He had returned home past 10 o'clock looking and feeling terrible, clasping his hands. He threw himself face down on the bed and kept repeating, shaking with convulsive sobs, "This is not it, this is not it, this is not it at all." Irina Prokhorovna accosted him and, of course, he ended by confessing everything to her, though to her alone in the whole house. She left him in bed, sternly impressing upon him that if he wanted to blubber, he should do his howling into the pillow so that no one would hear, and that he'd be a fool if he showed any such appearance tomorrow. She did become a bit pensive and immediately began tidying things up just in case. She managed to hide or destroy completely any unnecessary papers, books, perhaps even tracts. Yet, for all that, she in fact considered that she, her sister, her aunt, the girl student, and perhaps even her lop-eared brother, had nothing much to fear. When the nurse came running for her in the morning, she went to Maria Ignatievna without hesitation. However, she wanted terribly to find out all the sooner whether it was true what her husband had told her yesterday, in a frightened and insane whisper resembling delirium, about Pyotr Stepanovich's counting, with a view to common usefulness, on Kirillov. But she was too late in coming to Maria Ignatievna's, who, once she had sent the servant off and was left alone, was unable to stand it, got out of bed, and, throwing on herself whatever clothing came to hand, evidently something very light and inappropriate to the season, went to the wing herself to see Kirillov, figuring that he perhaps could tell her most surely about her husband. One can imagine how this woman who had just given birth was affected by what she saw there. Remarkably, she did not read Kirillov's death note, which lay in full view on the table, being so frightened, of course, as to overlook it completely. She ran to her room, seized the infant, and went with him out of the house and down the street. The morning was damp, there was mist. No passers-by were to be met on such an out-of-the-way street. She kept running, breathless, through the cold and oozy mud, and finally began knocking on house doors. At one house they did not open, at another they refused to open for a long time. She left in impatience and began knocking at a third house. This was the house of our merchant Tidov. Here she raised a great clamor, shouted, insisted incoherently that her husband had been killed. Shadov and something of his story were partly known to the Tidovs. They were horror-struck that she, having, in her own words, given birth just the day before, was running around the streets in such clothes and in such cold, with a barely covered infant in her arms. At first they thought she was simply raving, the more so as they were unable to make out who had been killed, Kirilov or her husband. Realizing that they did not believe her, she rushed to run farther, but was stopped by force, and they say she cried and struggled terribly. They went to Filipov's house, and in 2 hours Kirilov's suicide and his death note became known to the whole town. The police accosted the new mother, who was still conscious, and here it came to light that she had not read Kirilov's note, but precisely why she had concluded that her husband had been killed as well, this they could not get out of her. She only cried that if the other one was killed, then my husband has been killed, too. They were together. By noon she had fallen into unconsciousness, from which she never emerged, and some 3 days later she died. The baby caught cold and died even before her. Irina Prokhorovna, not finding Maria Ignatievna and the infant there, and realizing that things were bad, was about to rush home, but stopped at the gate and sent the nurse to ask the gentleman in the wing if Maria Ignatievna was there or if, perchance, he knew anything about her. The messenger came back wildly shouting for the whole street to hear. Having convinced her not to shout or tell anyone, employing the well-known argument that they'll have the law on you, she slipped away from the premises. It goes without saying that she was inconvenienced that same morning, as having been the new mother's midwife, but they found out little. She recounted very sensibly and coolly everything she herself had seen and heard at Shadov's, but concerning the story that had gone on she made plain that she knew and understood nothing of it. One can imagine what a hubbub arose all over town. A new story, another killing. But there was something else here now. It was becoming clear that there indeed existed a secret society of killers, of arsonist revolutionaries, of rebels. The terrible death of Liza, the murder of Stavrogin's wife, Stavrogin himself, the arson, the ball for the governesses, the licentiousness surrounding Yulia Mikhailovna. People even insisted on seeing some mystery in Stepan Trofimovitch's disappearance. There was a great deal of whispering about Nikolai Vsevolodovitch. Towards the end of the day they also learned of Fyodor Stepanovitch's absence, and, strangely, he was talked about least of all. What was talked about most of all that day was the senator. A crowd stood almost all morning by Filipov's house. The authorities were indeed led astray by Kirilov's note. They believed both in Kirilov's killing of Shadov and in the murderer's suicide. However, if the authorities were at a loss, they were not entirely so. The word park, for instance, so vaguely put into Kirilov's note, did not throw anyone off, as Fyodor Stepanovitch had reckoned. The police rushed at once to Skvoreshniki, and not only because there is a park there, as there is not anywhere else in our town, but also even following some sort of instinct, since all the horrors of the recent days were either directly or partially connected with Skvoreshniki. So at least I surmise. I will note that Varvara Petrovna had driven off to catch Stepan Trofimovitch early in the morning and with no knowledge of anything. The body was found in the pond towards evening of the same day, by certain clues. On the very spot of the murder, Shadov's peaked cap was found, forgotten with great light-mindedness by the murderers. The ocular and medical inspection of the corpse, along with certain surmises, awakened from the very first to suspicion that Kirilov must have had comrades. There came to light the existence of a Shatovo-Kirilovian secret society, connected with the tracks. But who were these comrades? On that day there was as yet no thought of our people. It was learned that Kirilov had lived as a recluse, and so solitarily that, as the note stated, Fedka had been able to lodge with him for many days, though he was being sought everywhere. Chiefly, everyone was tormented by the impossibility of drawing anything general and unifying from the whole tangle that presented itself. One can hardly imagine what conclusions and what mental anarchy our society, frightened to the point of panic, might have reached, if everything had not suddenly been explained all at once, the very next day, thanks to Lyamshin. He could not stand it. What happened to him was something that even Fyodor Stepanovich had begun to anticipate towards the end. Entrusted to Tolkachenko, and then to Urkel, he spent the whole of the next day lying in bed, apparently placid, his face turned to the wall, and without saying a word, barely answering when spoken to. He thus learned nothing throughout the day of what was happening in town. But Tolkachenko, who learned everything that was happening, took it into his head towards evening to drop his role with Lyamshin and absent himself from our town to the district capital, that is, simply to run away. Truly, they lost their minds, as Urkel had prophesied about them all. I will note incidentally that Liputin also disappeared from town that same day, before noon. But with this one it somehow happened that his disappearance became known to the authorities only the next day, towards evening, when his family, all frightened by his absence but silent out of fear, were directly accosted with questions. But to continue about Lyamshin. As soon as he was left alone, Urkel, relying on Tolkachenko, had gone home even earlier. He at once ran out of the house and, of course, very soon learned how matters stood. Without even stopping at home, he took to his heels and ran wherever his legs would carry him. But the night was so dark, and the undertaking so terrible and toilsome, that having gone down 2 or 3 streets, he returned home and locked himself in for the whole night. It seems he made an attempt at suicide towards morning, but nothing came of it. He sat locked in until almost noon, however, and then suddenly ran to the authorities. It is said that he crawled on his knees, sobbed and shrieked, kissed the floor, shouting that he was unworthy even to kiss the boots of the dignitaries who stood before him. He was calmed down and even treated benignly. The interrogation lasted, they say, about 3 hours. He declared everything, told the innermost secrets, everything he knew, all the details. He rushed ahead of himself, hastened with his confessions, even told what was unnecessary and without being asked. It turned out that he knew quite enough and had enough sense to present it well. The tragedy of Shatov and Kirilov, the fire, the death of the Lebyatkins, etc., were all put in the background. To the forefront came Fyodor Stepanovich, the secret society, the organization, the network. To the question of why so many murders, scandals, and abominations had been perpetrated, he replied with burning haste that it was all for the systematic shaking of the foundations, for the systematic corrupting of society and all principles, in order to dishearten everyone and make a hash of everything, and society being thus loosened, ailing and limp, cynical and unbelieving, but with an infinite yearning for some guiding idea and for self-preservation, to take it suddenly into their hands. Raising the banner of rebellion, and supported by the whole network of fivesomes, which would have been active all the while, recruiting and searching for practically all the means and all the weak spots that could be seized upon. He said in conclusion that here, in our town, Fyodor Stepanovich had arranged only the first trial of such systematic disorder, the program, so to speak, for further actions, even for all the fivesomes, and that this was, in fact, his own, Lyamshin's, thought, his own surmise, and that they must be sure to remember it, and that all this must be duly pointed out, how he had explained the matter so frankly and well-behavedly, and could therefore be very useful even in the future for services to the authorities. To the outright question, are there many fivesomes, he answered that there was an endless multitude, that the whole of Russia was covered with a network, and, though he did not present any proofs, I think his answer was completely sincere. He presented only the printed program of the society, printed abroad, and a plan for developing a system of further actions, which, though only a rough draft, was written by Fyodor Stepanovitch's own hand. It turned out that with regard to shaking the foundations, Lyamshin had quoted the paper verbatim, not omitting even periods and commas, though he had insisted it was merely his own understanding. Of Yulia Mikhailovna he said in a surprisingly funny way, and without even being asked, but rushing ahead of himself, that she was innocent and had simply been fooled. But, remarkably, he cleared Nikolai Stavrogin completely of any participation in the secret society, of any collusion with Fyodor Stepanovitch. Of the fond and quite ridiculous hopes Fyodor Stepanovitch had in Stavrogin, Lyamshin was totally unaware. The death of the Lebyatkins, according to him, was set up by Fyodor Stepanovitch alone, with no participation from Nikolai Vsevolodovitch, for the cunning purpose of drawing the latter into the crime and thus into dependence on Fyodor Stepanovitch, but instead of the gratitude which Fyodor Stepanovitch had undoubtedly and light-mindedly counted on, he had aroused only complete indignation and even despair in the noble Nikolai Vsevolodovitch. He finished about Stavrogin, also hurrying and without being asked, with an obviously deliberate hint that the man was all but an extremely big wig, that there was some secret in it, that he lived among us, so to speak, incognito, that he had a commission, and that he would very possibly visit us again from Petersburg. Lyamshin was sure that Stavrogin was in Petersburg, only this time in a totally different way and in different circumstances and in the retinue of such persons as we might soon hear about, and that he had heard all this from Fyodor Stepanovitch, a secret enemy of Nikolai Vsevolodovitch. I will make a nota bene. 2 months later, Lyamshin confessed that he had cleared Stavrogin on purpose then, hoping for his protection and that he would solicit for him a 2-degree alleviation from Petersburg and supply him with money and letters of recommendation in exile. 3 From this confession one can see that he indeed had a greatly exaggerated notion of Nikolai Stavrogin. That same day, of course, Virginsky was also arrested, and, in the heat of the moment, his whole household as well. Irina Prokhorovna, her sister, aunt, and even the girl student, have long been free. They even say that Shigaliov, too, is supposedly sure to be released in the nearest future, since he does not fit into any category of the accused. However, this is still just talk. Virginsky admitted his guilt at once and in everything. He was sick in bed with a fever when he was arrested. They say he was almost glad. A weight fell from my heart, he is supposed to have said. One hears of him that he is now giving evidence frankly, yet even with a certain dignity, and has not surrendered any of his bright hopes, though at the same time he curses the political path, as opposed to the social one, onto which he had been so accidentally and light-mindedly drawn by a whirlwind of concurrent circumstances, for his behavior during the committing of the murder is explained in a mitigating way for him, and it seems that he, too, may count on a certain mitigation of his lot. So at least it is asserted among us. But an alleviation of Urkel's fate will hardly be possible. This one, since his arrest, has either kept silent or distorted the truth as far as possible. Not one word of repentance has been obtained from him so far. And yet he has aroused a certain sympathy for himself even in the sternest judges, by his youth, by his defenselessness, by obvious indications that he was simply the fanatical victim of a political seducer, and most of all by what has been discovered about his behavior towards his mother, to whom he used to send almost half of his insignificant pay. His mother is now with us. She is a weak and ailing woman, grown old before her time. She weeps and literally grovels at their feet, pleading for her son. Come what may, there are many among us who feel sorry for Urkel. Liputin was arrested in Petersburg, where he had already been living for 2 whole weeks. An almost incredible thing occurred with him, which is even difficult to explain. They say he had a passport in another name and every opportunity for successfully slipping abroad, and quite a considerable amount of money with him, and yet he stayed in Petersburg and did not go anywhere. He spent some time looking for Stavrogin and Fyodor Stepanovich, and then suddenly went on a binge and got into debauchery beyond all measure, like a man who has utterly lost all common sense and understanding of his position. And so he was arrested in Petersburg, in a house of ill fame somewhere, and none too sober. Rumor has it that he has by no means lost heart now, is lying in his testimony, and is preparing himself for the forthcoming trial with a certain solemnity and hope. He even intends to have some say at his trial. Tolkachenko, arrested somewhere in the district capital 10 days after his flight, behaves with incomparably more politeness, does not lie, does not dodge, tells all he knows, does not justify himself, acknowledges his guilt in all modesty, but is also inclined to loquacity. He speaks much and willingly, and when it comes to a knowledge of the people and its revolutionary elements, he even postures and desires to produce an effect. One hears that he, too, intends to have his say at the trial. Generally, he and Liputin are not very frightened, which is even strange. I repeat, the affair is not yet over. Now, 3 months later, our society has rested, relaxed, recovered, acquired its own opinion, so much so that some even regard Fyodor Stepanovich himself almost as a genius, at least as having the abilities of genius. Organization, sir, they say in the club, raising a finger aloft. However, all this is quite innocent, and, besides, those who say it are not many. Others, on the contrary, do not deny him acuteness of abilities, but couple it with a total ignorance of reality, a terrible abstractedness, a dull and deformed one-sidedness of development, and, proceeding from all that, an extraordinary light-mindedness. Concerning his moral aspects everyone agrees, here there is no argument. I really do not know who else to mention, so as not to forget anyone. Mavriky Nikolaevich has gone away somewhere altogether. The old Drozdov woman has lapsed into second childhood. However, there remains one more very grim story to tell. I will confine myself to facts alone. On her arrival, Varvara Petrovna stayed at her town house. All the accumulated news poured in on her at once and shook her terribly. She shut herself up alone. It was evening, everyone was tired and went to bed early. In the morning the maid, with a mysterious air, handed Darya Pavlovna a letter. This letter, by her account, had come the day before, but late, when everyone had already retired, so that she dared not wake her up. It had come not in the mail, but through an unknown person, to Alexei Yegoryk in Skvoreshniki. And Alexei Yegoryk had at once delivered it himself, yesterday evening, into her hands, and had at once gone back to Skvoreshniki. Darya Pavlovna, her heart pounding, looked at the letter for a long time without daring to open it. She knew who it was from, it had been written by Nikolai Stavrogin. She read the inscription on the envelope, to Alexei Yegoryk, to be given to Darya Pavlovna, in secret. Here is this letter, word for word, without correcting the least mistake in style of a young Russian squire who never fully learned Russian grammar, in spite of all his European education. My good Darya Pavlovna, you once wanted to be my nurse and made me promise to send for you when needed. I am going away in 2 days and will not come back. Want to go with me? Last year, like Herzen, I registered as a citizen of Canton Uri 5 and no one knows it. I have already bought a small house there. I have 12,000 rubles left, we'll go and live there eternally. I don't want to move anywhere ever. The place is very dull, a ravine, the mountains cramped sight and thought. Very grim. It was because there was a small house for sale. If you don't like it, I'll sell it and buy another in another place. I'm not well, but I hope with the local air I'll get rid of my hallucinations. Physically, that is, and morally you know all, only is it all? I've told you a lot of my life. But not all. Even to you not all. Incidentally, I confirm that in my conscience I am guilty of my wife's death. I have not seen you since then and so I'm confirming it. I am also guilty before Lizaveta Nikolaevna, but here you do know, here you predicted almost everything. Better don't come. The fact that I'm calling you to me is a terrible baseness. And why should you bury your life with me? You are dear to me, and when I was in anguish I felt good near you, only in your presence could I speak of myself aloud. Nothing follows from that. You yourself defined it as nursing, it's your expression, why sacrifice so much? Realize, also, that I do not pity you, since I'm calling you, and do not respect you, since I'm waiting for you to come. And yet I call and wait. In any case, I need your answer, because I must leave very soon. In such case, I'll go alone. I have no hope from Yuri, I'm simply going. I did not choose a gloomy place on purpose. Nothing binds me to Russia, everything in it is as foreign to me as everywhere else. True, I disliked living in it more than elsewhere, but even in it I was unable to come to hate anything. I've tested my strength everywhere. You advised me to do that, in order to know myself. This testing for myself, and for show, proved it to be boundless, as before all my life. In front of your very eyes I endured a slap from your brother, I acknowledged my marriage publicly. But what to apply my strength to that I have never seen, nor do I see it now, despite your encouragements in Switzerland, which I believed. I am as capable now as ever before of wishing to do a good deed, and I take pleasure in that. Along with it, I wish for evil and also feel pleasure. But both the one and the other, as always, are too shallow, and are never very much. My desires are far too weak, they cannot guide. One can cross a river on a log, but not on a chip. All this so that you don't think I'm going to Yuri with any hopes. As always, I do not blame anyone. I've tried great debauchery and exhausted my strength in it, but I don't like debauchery and I did not want it. You've been observing me lately. Do you know that I even looked at these negators of ours with spite, envying them their hopes? But your fears were empty, I could not be their comrade, because I shared nothing. Nor could I do it out of ridicule, for spite, and not because I was afraid of the ridiculous. I cannot be afraid of the ridiculous, but because, after all, I have the habits of a decent man and felt disgusted. Still, if I had more spite and envy for them, I might even have gone over to them. You can judge how easy it has been for me and how I've tossed about. Dear friend, tender and magnanimous being whom I divined. Perhaps you dream of giving me so much love and of pouring upon me so much of the beautiful from your beautiful soul, that you hope in that way finally to set up some goal for me? No, you had better be more careful. My love will be as shallow as I myself am, and you will be unhappy. Your brother told me that he who loses his ties with his earth also loses his gods, that is, all his goals. One can argue endlessly about everything, but what poured out of me was only negation, with no magnanimity and no force. Or not even negation. Everything is always shallow and listless. Magnanimous Kirillov could not endure his idea and shot himself, but I do see that he was magnanimous because he was not in his right mind. I can never lose my mind, nor can I ever believe an idea to the same degree as he did. I cannot even entertain an idea to the same degree. I could never shoot myself. I know I ought to kill myself, to sweep myself off the earth like a vile insect, but I'm afraid of suicide, because I'm afraid of showing magnanimity. I know it will be one more deceit, the last deceit in an endless series of deceits. What's the use of deceiving oneself just so as to play at magnanimity? There never can be indignation or shame in me, and so no despair either. Forgive me for writing so much. I've come to my senses, and this is accidental. This way 100 pages are too little and 10 lines are enough. To call for a nurse, 10 lines are enough. Since I left, I've been living 6 stations away, in the station master's house. I got to know him while I was on a spree in Petersburg 5 years ago. No one knows I'm living here. Write care of him. I enclose the address. Nikolai Stavrogin. Darya Pavlovna went at once and showed the letter to Varvara Petrovna. She read it and asked Dasha to step out so that she could read it again by herself, but she somehow very quickly called her again. "Will you go?" she asked, almost timidly. "I will," Dasha replied. "Get ready. We're going together." Dasha looked at her questioningly. "And what is there for me to do here now? Does it make any difference? I, too, will register in Uri and live in the ravine. Don't worry, I won't bother you." They quickly began getting ready, in order to catch the noon train. But before half an hour had gone by, Alexei Yegorych came from Skvoreshniki. He reported that Nikolai Vsevolodovich had suddenly arrived that morning, on the early train, and was in Skvoreshniki, but in such a state that he wouldn't answer any questions, walked through all the rooms, and locked himself in his half. I concluded on coming to report without his orders, Alexei Yegorych added, with a very imposing air. Varvara Petrovna gave him a piercing look and asked no questions. The carriage was readied instantly. She went with Dasha. On the way, it is said, she crossed herself frequently. All the doors in his half were open, and Nikolai Vsevolodovich was nowhere to be found. "Maybe in the attic, ma'am?" Fomushka said cautiously. Remarkably, several servants followed Varvara Petrovna into his half. The rest of the servants all waited in the reception room. Never before would they have allowed themselves such a breach of etiquette. Varvara Petrovna noticed it but said nothing. They went upstairs to the attic. There were 3 rooms there, no one was found in any of them. Could he maybe have gone up there? Someone pointed at the door to the garret. Indeed, the permanently closed door to the garret was now unlocked and standing wide open. It led to a long, very narrow, and terribly steep wooden stairway that went up almost under the roof. There was a sort of little room there, too. "I won't go up there." Why on earth would he climb up there? Varvara Petrovna turned terribly pale, looking around at the servants. They stared at her and said nothing. Dasha was trembling. Varvara Petrovna rushed up the stairs, Dasha followed her, but as soon as she entered the garret, she cried out and fell unconscious. The citizen of Canton Uri was hanging just inside the door. On the table lay a scrap of paper with the penciled words, "Blame no one, it was I." With it on the table there also lay a hammer, a piece of soap, and a big nail, evidently prepared in reserve. The strong silk cord upon which Nikolai Vsevolodovich had hanged himself, evidently prepared and chosen beforehand, was heavily soaped. Everything indicated premeditation and consciousness to the last minute. Our medical men, after the autopsy, completely and emphatically ruled out insanity. Finus. About the author. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky, 1821–1881, was a Russian novelist, essayist, and philosopher whose works stand among the most influential in world literature. Born in Moscow, Dostoevsky's life was marked by extremes, brilliance and poverty, acclaim and exile, faith and despair. Arrested for his involvement with a reformist group, he narrowly escaped execution and spent years in a Siberian labor camp, experiences that profoundly shaped his spiritual vision. Upon his return, he wrote a series of masterpieces that probed the deepest questions of human existence, including Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, Demons, and The Brothers Karamazov. His characters wrestle with guilt, freedom, redemption, and the mystery of divine grace, reflecting his lifelong search for meaning in a world torn between belief and doubt. Dostoevsky's penetrating psychology and moral insight anticipated modern existentialism and continue to inspire readers, philosophers, and artists around the world. His works endure as a mirror to the human soul, revealing both its darkest depths and its capacity for transcendence. Pigeon, Publishing House, presented Demons. Author, Fyodor Dostoevsky. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. We hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this classic, follow the show and leave a quick review, and join us every Tuesday and Thursday for more timeless stories.